Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the special board meeting of the Lake County Board of Supervisors for June 30th to order at 1:05 p.m. I got 1:05. So as traditional, we'll stand for a moment of silence. Are there any dedications today? Okay, seeing no dedications, dedicate this moment of silence to the people who have lost their lives to COVID-19. I think we passed 126,000 today. So Supervisor Crandall, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number 4.1, or is there consideration of extra items not appearing on the posted agenda today? And I think it's yes, so go ahead and turn it over. Supervisor Scott, did you put this on or?
I think maybe either Carol or Todd.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I put it on behalf of the Behavioral Health Director, Todd Metcalf, but he's here to present it to you.
Okay. Go ahead, Todd.
Do I need to plead the case that we need?
Oh, yeah, you know, we got to take it up and see if it's an extra item at this point, so.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
I think this needs to be taken up because it came to our attention after the posting of the agenda, and it's an emergency item that needs to be taken care of today before our next posting of the agenda. It's our COVID homeless center that we need to sign the contract for.
Okay, and that was your motion?
That was my motion.
I second that.
Well, I haven't heard. Don't we have to know what it's about before we can take it up as an extra? I mean, just I don't know anything. I don't have any details at all on it. So
Okay, I'll go ahead and read the item for you, Rob. 4.1, extra item, consideration of extra agenda item, consideration of amendment number 2 to the agreement between the County of Lake and Lake County Behavioral Health as lead agency for the county continuum of care in Kelseyville United Methodist Church as the fiscal agent for the Hope Harbor Warming Center project for fiscal year 2019-20.
I guess the question I have, and I'm just trying to, maintain the integrity of the whole purpose of an extra, but we didn't have a board meeting scheduled, so would we have held a special board meeting for just this item had we not had this other item come up? I mean, that's kind of the criteria.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes, go ahead, Carol.
Yes, in all likelihood, we would have needed to call a special meeting for this item because to not do so would have meant that the warming shelter would have closed. And Director Metcalf can explain the basis of the extra, how this came up in a last minute manner.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to hear that because I think we're getting kind of loose on the extras here. And we've known the warming center, we've had it for several months. And to not know it was going to be closing at some point, I'm having a little trouble with that concept.
Go ahead, Director Metcalf.
Oh, thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and other members of the board. My name is Todd Metcalf. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Services, and I'm hoping to provide some clarity to why this extra item has appeared on the agenda. This extra item before you is an amendment to our existing contract agreement with Kelseyville United Methodist Church, who currently is the fiscal agent for the Hope Harbor COVID-19 shelter in Lakeport. And as Rob just pointed out, the existing contract with Kelseyville United Methodist Church as the fiscal agent expires today. So that further necessitates the need for approval of this amendment. And the reason this came up last Thursday after hours, I met with members of the Hope Harbor COVID-19 shelter governing board to negotiate a contract for another month of shelter operations beyond today, June 30th. So during that meeting, Kelseyville United Methodist Church had agreed to continue its fiscal sponsorship for one more month through July 31st. So I needed time to draft a contract amendment, which you now have before you. So basically, as has been stated, I'm requesting this board's approval of this contract amendment between Lake County Behavioral Health Services and Kelseyville United Methodist Church, just to add another month of fiscal sponsorship of Kelseyville United Methodist Church over the COVID-19 shelter from July 1st through July 31st, 2020. I hope that helped a little bit to clarify why.
Well, it's fine, and I appreciate it. I know everybody's got a lot of stuff going on. I don't think it meets the extra personally, because no one would have been kicked out tomorrow if we didn't do it, waited till next Tuesday. But, you know, I understand, and I'm not, it's not an extra, you know, it does not meet the qualifications as an extra for that purpose. You were dealing with it last week, and that's good. And we could have just as easily taken it up on Tuesday. The whole purpose of this is for the public to be able to weigh in on it and know in advance for all of these items. I mean, Anita can speak to it much better than I can, but we can't just throw things on the extra as an extra because we want to try to get it done ahead of next week's agenda. It's not legal. It's not right. And
but Supervisor Brown, it would have closed today.
Okay. So, and I guess we can get into this discussion later, but why? I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but why would it wait till today? If it was
because
we let this thing go for 3 months.
The group that had been operating it gave Todd notice that they were going to stop, and then they advised him that they changed their mind Thursday night.
Okay.
And that
so you have a motion on the floor. You have a motion on the floor. So go ahead.
Yes, we do.
I hope we stay on top of this stuff a little bit better, so it's not thrown at us at the last minute.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor, a motion and a second to accept this as an extra item 4.1. And so we'll go ahead and are we doing a roll call vote?
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep doing that since some of us are online.
Johanna, would you do the roll call vote, or is it going to be you, Carol?
I can do it.
Anna will?
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Supervisor Brown?
No.
And Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, moving right along, what I would like to do is go ahead and go with Dr. Pace's report, and then right after we'll jump into 4.1, get that completed. And then
Mr.
move back.
Chair,
Yes.
I believe wasn't your current action just to take it up as an extra, first of
Yes.
all, and to act on the item?
What's that?
You have two actions there, one to take it up as an extra and one to consider whether or not you're going to approve it. I believe you just took one action.
Yes.
And I believe our chair was saying, let's go ahead and go with the update on COVID-19.
Oh, and consider
Yeah.
the item later?
Yeah, we'll consider it after Dr. Pace's report. That's what I'd like to do.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
That's all right.
misunderstood.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move to item 5, our consent agenda item, which we have one consent agenda item 5.1. Are there any would anyone like to pull this item from the board?
Nope.
All right, hearing none, I will open it up. Would anybody from the public like to pull this item? It's 5.1, adopt a resolution establishing 2020-21 appropriations limit for the County of Lake Special Districts Governing Board, governed by the Board of Supervisors. And it's a little different today. We can't see. Jake, will you go open the room, I guess? That's what we still have to do it that way.
Yeah, we could still do it that way. I don't have any hands raised at this moment, so
Okay.
it doesn't look like that's a thing. So I will unmute the floor here. All right, the floor is unmuted. If you would like to make a comment, please state your first and last name.
Okay, hearing none, Jake, go ahead and close the room, and we'll bring it back to the board for action.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve 5.1 on the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been a motion and a second. Can we go ahead and do the roll call vote?
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes.
And Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on right along to our 6.1 item, our 1 p.m. consideration of an update on COVID-19. So I know we have Dr. Pace here, and so we'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to Dr. Pace.
Good afternoon. Looks like, so you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and the supervisors here for the COVID update for today. And so the situation's changing some from last week. We now are up to 60 total cases, 20 are active. We have 4 people in the hospital now, one of those which is out of county got transferred to a higher level of care. The state is also in a similar kind of situation, although worse. They're increasing significantly. They've had a total of, well, they're having kind of, yesterday there was 8,000 new cases identified in the state. We've also crossed in California a total of 6,000 deaths that are COVID related that have been identified as COVID. And, you know, the situation is such that the numbers are increasing in multiple places around the state, and there's a fair amount of anxiety about what that's going to do to the healthcare system and ability to respond in a good way. We're still in pretty good shape, really. There's quite a bit of hospital capacity still, and we are increasing, but it's not at all an overwhelming situation right now. So I think, you know, really the question here is how do we move forward in opening up, relaxing restrictions, allowing more activity while keeping people relatively safe, keeping the vulnerable groups safe, keeping the infection out of the congregate living situations, making sure the hospitals don't get overwhelmed. As we loosen up, we were anticipating more cases, and that's what we're seeing now. And so we're trying to walk this fine balance between keeping clamped down too far and also not loosening up too far, and that we get too much infection and all the problems that go along with that. With this situation now, we're seeing one large cluster that's having several cases associated with that, and then there's been identified infections from a couple other different points, and then there's a couple people we haven't really been able to figure out where they got it from. So it definitely is a different perspective than we've been seeing before, where there seems to be a lot of activity, some of which we aren't able to identify. So that's sort of indicating that there's likely community spread out there, which means that it's out there in the community, and we aren't just dealing with specific kind of seedings from out of the county. There are basically, we're just trying to focus on how to contain this and how to identify it as it's going on. So we'll just kind of go through some of the different parts. The testing sites, the Verily site is still functioning. It looks like they're going to be able to continue to get state funding through the end of August is what we've last heard. So that was actually good news. We, through some work with Supervisor Crandall, there's going to be a site up in Upper Lake tomorrow, I believe, and it'll be alternating every other week in Upper Lake and every other week in Middletown on Wednesdays, and then Monday, Tuesday in Clear Lake, Thursday, Friday in Lakeport. We still could use some help with volunteers. We appreciate the people that have been come in and helped out, but we're continually struggling with staffing with that. We also switched the hours around a little bit, and because it's getting so hot out there and it's hard for the staff. So we pushed it a little earlier in the morning. It seems like that may have limited the capacity too much. And so it seems like some people are having trouble getting appointments now And it looks like some people are coming from out of county, which is part of the issue. I don't know, that we're just starting to get word that people are having trouble getting in, and it seems to be partly related to out of county. As the demand for testing is going up all over, the labs are getting clogged up and the sampling sites are getting clogged, but also I think the shortening of the hours. So we're going to have to relook at that, but that may be a problem that people are noticing. The housing issue, which Todd is bringing up and Supervisor Scott, is really important. It's having the ability to house the homeless and also to, especially the high-risk, vulnerable homeless, is an issue. It's the funding changed, and some of the people that were willing to manage it are no longer willing to manage it, and so things changed kind of quickly on us. And so we really appreciate, there's been a lot of work going on to try to get this going, and it will be very good for the community and also really important for us keeping the variants going moving forward, to basically use this as a bridge. The long-term goal is to get the juvenile hall set up to be the kind of a longer term solution, but this is just to help us get to where we can get the staffing and the whole facility together. It's just been a little bit of a struggle with a lot of these different pieces moving. So, but this resolution today would be a big help if that gets passed and gets taken care of. The contact tracing is, we are, with all this rise in cases, we are still managing with the contact tracing. It's definitely pushing our staff pretty much to the wall to get it going, but we've been able to keep up with it. We're trying to hook in, there's a state system that we're trying to hook into that. There's been some logistical problems on the state's end, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to get into that and use that because I'm anticipating that this is going to continue being a slightly elevated situation, and hopefully not an extremely accelerated situation. So that's kind of what we're hoping for. The reopening, adding restriction kind of question is, in terms of the variance, we are meeting all the state variance metrics at this point. We'll be continuing to monitor that, and that is going to end up on our webpage here, probably within a couple days, so that people can follow that. Also, just as an aside, we did get the demographic information up there yesterday afternoon after we crossed the 50 cases. There have been a few hiccups, but I think we're working those out now. But if people are seeing problems with that or issues, please let us know and we'll be working on it. The governor, so as the state is opening up and getting into more and more trouble, probably people are seeing in the news that they're starting to actually clamp down now more. So in Imperial County down at the border, where things are pretty much very accelerated, the governor's recommending that they go back to a full shelter in place. They're having a very high number of cases, and their hospitals have been shipping out people for a week or so, and it's not good. And so the governor's basically recommending that they're going to shut down, and if they don't comply, he's sort of intimating that he's going to go in and make them do it. I'm not sure how that'll all work out, but it's very useful for us to watch how the state is responding around to the different areas. The other thing he did yesterday was close down the bars in the states that have been on their monitoring list for a couple of weeks. So this is the first step where they've really gone to moving back, adding more restrictions. And we're not in that situation. We're okay at this point in terms of the monitoring metrics. But again, we're seeing how the state looks like they may be responding in the future. If you're on the monitoring list for a while, they're going to identify some of the high risk areas and try to close that down. We are in the process of trying to develop a strategy that we can do locally. Supervisor Sabate has spoken a lot in the past about trying to have local control. And so we are trying to develop this sort of strategy and proactive strategy so that if things start going the wrong direction, we can try to selectively use the data and try to selectively contain things and protect the people that need to be protected without having to go to big dramatic suppressive activities. So we're trying to work on that and coordinate that with however the state's doing it. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go. We're making this up as we go along. There's no real blueprint for that, but we're trying to do that. basically, one of the things we're seeing just in looking around the state and the country is large group activities where people are coming close together without wearing masks, and it seems to be the biggest risk area. So some of the church activities is one of the things we've seen. The bars, you can see a lot of the Facebook things at the bars seem to be places where it's being spread. It looks like potentially some of these protests that have been going on are a place where a lot of it's been spread. You know, so 4th of July comes up as a question, and we're kind of in conversation about how to go forward with this. At this point, the current plans are, the way I understand it, is Lakeport is not having community fireworks, but is doing the Safe and Sane fireworks sales for people to kind of do their own activities. So there's not going to be a big community activity. Canocti Harbor, it sounds like, is going to be doing some larger fireworks out over the lake. Clear Lake is doing an activity at this point with community fireworks, mainly designed around a drive-in approach where people will drive in and watch from their cars. There are some food vendors that will be there so people can go get the food, socially distance, come back to their car. And the hope is that this will be people will be able to stick by the rules and follow along. It sounds like these are very big activities in the county, and this is the kind of setting where it can really end up being a super spreading activity. So I really encourage people that are in the vulnerable groups or that have chronic medical illnesses to just stay away and stay home, because this is the kind of setting where it can be a real problem. You know, if things get worse this week, we may have to make some modifications either to scale it back or to shut it down completely. It sort of depends on how the numbers go. But I am concerned, but it seems like because of the planning that's been done, and because of the work that's been done with the city of Clear Lake and with the Lions Club, they're trying to really put some measures in place to help contain it and direct people in the right direction. So it seems, at least at this point, worth it to continue moving ahead. So I think that's probably it right now. Yeah, so, you know, we are just moving into a different phase, and it's going to be kind of, I suspect this will be this way through the summer, and hopefully we are able to continue to use social distancing and masking as ways to slow the transmission so that it can kind of stay at a low burn as opposed to going into a big forest fire kind of situation. But we're watching everything closely and trying to manage as best we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
I wanted to just clarify one thing. You said Canocti Harbor was having fireworks, but I think you meant Canocti Vista.
Right.
Right. You're right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pace. Appreciate the update. Did have one question for this week. The testing sites, where times and places. Could you just run through that real quick?
I believe it's at, let me hope somebody texts me from my team, but my understanding is it's in Lakeport yesterday and today at
Clear Lake.
I'm sorry, Clear Lake yesterday and today, and then I believe it's going to be in Upper Lake tomorrow, and then in Lakeport Thursday and Friday.
Okay.
And I know yesterday and
it starts
today.
at 8 in the morning. It's at 8 till 11, and people need to get appointments online at the Verily.com website. If people are having trouble getting online appointments, they should call us at the health department or email us at the website, because there is another way that it can be done without being online. If somebody doesn't have good access or they get frustrated going through that application process, which I can tell you I do, and they can do it through some help on the phone. So we've kind of figured out a workaround to that. But so this week it's Clear Lake yesterday and today, Upper Lake tomorrow, Lakeport Thursday and Friday.
And can you give us that number too, the 263 number?
263-8174, 263-8174. And the email is MHOAC, MOAC, @lakecountyca.gov.
And thank you very much, Dr. Pace. Only bring that up because we are getting, I don't know if the rest of supervisors, people are starting to call and ask for that information. So just want to make sure we're getting it out every week to them, so we're pointing them in the right direction. I think definitely, like you said, people are seeing what's going on around the country and very interested in getting testing now. Some of the folks that weren't interested before are now being interested. So we're just making sure we get that information out to them. All right, thank you. Any board members at this point? Any comments? Supervisor Sabatier?
We're back.
Oh, I forgot the pen.
We're back to pens.
I forgot the pen.
Yes, thank you. I had a question for the Dr. Pace, for our public health officer. Has there been, and I apologize, I haven't been able to be at the Monday meetings. I've been volunteering over at the test sites, and I'm sure maybe it was discussed there. Have we gotten any updates from our sewer tests? I know we had received something, but it had not been gone through for the exact data that came out of that. Are we getting more results from the sewer testing? Are we seeing positives? Are we seeing negatives? What's the status on that?
Right. So the sewer testing, in the beginning, we were kind of excited about it because it seemed like it was a way to get insight into, to get a little heads up before the tests were turning positive that it was actually in the community. And that was kind of the way they were starting to recognize on the East Coast that they had seen that there were rises in the presence of the virus in the sewage before, and then a week or two later, they noticed a rise in the cases in the community. The problem is that because of so much demand around the country, there's been really like a 2 to 3 week lag in getting the results back. So we did get some results back this weekend, I believe. It was, I first heard about it Monday, so yesterday, from June 10th and June 17th. And there was some low-level activity in a couple of the different regions that basically correlated with what we already knew from the testing that was happening with the people, with the Verily test sites. So it hasn't really given us any additional information other than to confirm what we've already been seeing. And they're hoping that they've been working out some of the kinks, and I think Scott and Jan were basically saying they thought we might be able to start getting results back within 7 to 10 days or something like that, and then it would be a little more useful.
And in comparison to that first test that we received where all 4 were showing positive, is it showing anything different, anything less?
Yeah, it's running lower, and usually like 2 of the sites were non-detect and 2 of the sites were low level with basically Clear Lake and Kelseyville were showing some, and that's basically consistent with what we were seeing with some of the Verily testing.
And I'll just leave it as, for this specific topic, I'll leave it as it's interesting because when we first got our first sewer test, we weren't doing as many tests for COVID-19, so we weren't as aware as we are now. I mean, we're testing about 4 to 5 times the amount we were back then. And so for the tests to show that much more back then versus now, maybe the tests got better at detecting. Maybe they weren't detecting so well. Maybe they were false positive. There's all kinds of potential situations that could occur, but it's still interesting to see that we were showing higher levels then as we were now, which means that it could be manageable what we have now rather than intending for or expecting for it to continue and rise and rise. And I'm hopeful that it doesn't keep rising and rising. We'll see what happens as the future goes. As far as testing and the time, first, I appreciate that the time slots were changed. I also appreciate, I would not even know where to begin for his last name, but I know Dean is a gentleman that works over at Public Health. He was very flexible and very quick to move the site from the city of Clear Lake, from the public library over to now over at the Austin Beach Resort. It was a great place to go ahead and do the testing there. But I would suggest if it was open 9 to 1, being open from 8 to 12, that way it's the same hours, just different time slot, just so that you are in the cooler weather. Maybe that's still a possibility. I know that that wouldn't be a problem for me to help out during those hours. I'm not sure about the other clinical staff that are out there, but I think that whole situation is moving fluidly. Obviously, it's a whole lot easier if you can make an appointment versus driving in without an appointment. We're more than happy to help you out, but it does take time away, and it's a process to have to deal with right there on the spot. So if you can, definitely make that appointment. And also, I was looking at positivity rates, and I'm wondering, do you have the positivity rates as far as what we have today, and in comparison to what we've been seeing over the course of COVID-19 going through our communities since April 5th? Because I have my own numbers, but I'm hesitant to share them because maybe they're incorrect. But I'm wondering if you have your positivity rates, because I know right now we're looking at Imperial County as being the worst, and they're at like 23% positivity rate, meaning almost 1 out of every 4 tests is turning out to be positive, which is why they're getting squashed on going into stage 2 and backing out on some of the openings that they've done, because that's a very bad positivity rate. And just kind of curious where we stand at this moment.
Well, short answer is we haven't calculated it yet for the last couple of days because, up until last Thursday or so, we were at 42 or something like that last Thursday. And we've had 20 cases over the last 4 or 5 days. So up until that point, our positivity rate was very low, which is a good thing. That means you're testing plenty of people and you're not seeing a lot of positives. Over the last several days, we still have hundreds of tests still outstanding, waiting for the results. So it would be a kind of a moot point. So when they do the positivity test statewide, it's usually a 7-day lag or something like that. When we're sending out to Quest at this point, we can get it. Some of the tests are taking 6 to 7 days for the results to come back from the day they're sampled. So you have to give a little bit of a lag time. So I can tell you though, if we're doing 100 tests a day, and that's on the low end, we're probably doing something like 130 a day or something. So say you do 100 tests a day, if you're doing 8%, that's 8 positives a day. So that would be over a 4-day period, that would be 32 or something. So, to get to 8%, which is kind of what the state's using as their cutoff date, their cutoff data, we're still well below that even in this peak period over the last couple of days. And a lot of the tests have been done that aren't even resulted yet. So, I'll tell you again next week. I'll give you a number next week of what I think our most recent positivity rate is.
Right. And my last question is, I know that when 2 cases went back to their place of residence, whether that was Mendocino County or Sonoma County, we dropped those numbers from our statistics, and now it shows on the public health website that 2 of them were relocated. Due to the fact that one of our cases is at the hospital rather than at home, is that the reason why it's not under the relocation and that we're still counting them as a case here?
So the way that works is if 2 people relocate out of the county to their home county or whatever, then they would become under that other county's jurisdiction. When somebody leaves, so there's a whole thing that the way the state monitors these things so that they avoid double counting. So if somebody goes out of county to another hospital, they stick with the county of their residence as where they're declared. If they go out, if they are in a SNF, they stay where the SNF is. If they go to what was the other one? There's another one too. So, but basically, these are ways that if they're in a jail and they test positive, then that's the county that gets the positive. And if they relocate afterwards, then it's a different situation. So, basically, this is the way that the state's trying to manage so that people don't get counted twice. So the answer to your question is that person who went out of county to a higher level of care is still counted by us, and we still are keeping tabs on that person.
Okay. And the reason I asked is because right here it says hospitalized 4, and those are the 4 that you're counting. But I know that we need to also watch our beds here, and I want to make sure that we're counting that correctly so that it's 3 beds out of the 50 plus that we have here versus 4, just to make sure that when we're looking to see how tight we're getting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Bruno, it's Eichelman,
Supervisor Brown?
Dean Eichelman.
Dean Eichelman, yeah.
Yep. Dean's been awesome.
Yeah, he has. That's why I want to make sure we got his last name right.
Thank you for that.
Any more questions from the board? Comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Supervisor Crandall.
I thank you too. I was going to say that I looked it up while it was just Dean Eichelman. He helped me out with the spot in Upper Lake, and that'll be taking place tomorrow. And also Lars and I can't think of his name right now, Brian Powers. They worked hard to get that going so quickly, and so I appreciate that. That was a really good thing for the North Shore. And so I do have a question though, Dr. Pace, and I probably haven't, you probably answered it before, but I just wanted to make sure to reiterate it. How long will we be having the capability to test? I know that you said something along the lines of the end of July.
So basically, it looks like the current discussion is that Verily signed a contract with the state through the end of August.
Okay.
There's a lot, the state is, you all probably know better than me, the state is a little, not terribly transparent sometimes with some of the way they make these decisions, but there was some rumblings for a while that they might be pulling the sites at the lower use counties. That seems to have dropped away now, and it looks like what's happened is they've signed a contract now with both the OptumServe and the Verily sites through the end of August. Then the way they're starting to message it is that after that point, it's going to be up to the counties either to sign a contract with Verily or to figure out a way to do the testing on their own. So now they're sort of framing it. Initially, they were framing it like the state's going to really help ramp up testing and get it going and keep everybody in the state safe. And now it's more like, well, we're doing this as a transition move so that you guys can take it on. So part of what we're in the process of doing is trying to have the discussion with our local medical partners to make sure that they're in a position that they can really take that on. Because originally, they weren't able to do that. There weren't enough supplies, and that was the problem. Now the supply situation has opened up. We've been providing them with all the supplies they need. They're working with their own pathways, and so the supply situation isn't the issue. But now with the Verily site here, that's a more convenient way for everybody to do it in some ways. So what we're going to have to do now is shift back over to getting the medical partners to take that on, and probably public health will have to do some stand-up sites to keep the number, the availability up to a reasonable level. So we're working on plans for, it looks, at this point, it looks like we're going to be good through August, and then we are working on other arrangements for after that. That doesn't cost the county a lot of money.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because that's what I was going to ask, but that's good that you're looking into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Pace. Seeing no more questions from the board. Supervisor Brown, do you have any questions? I don't see him anywhere, so. Okay, hearing none from the board. We'll go ahead and open it up to public input. One question, I guess, or clarification, when we do public input, Jake, you'll go through and see whose hands are up, because I don't see that anywhere if I'm not seeing it.
I'm going through and watching for raised hands from the Zoom.
All right, so is there any public input or questions for Dr. Pace at this point?
Currently, we have no raised hands, but I will unmute the floor and see if there's any interest.
Okay. Turn that down.
All right, unmute that guy. About that.
They were trying to put hasty boys.
The floor is unmuted. If you would like to make a comment, please state your first and last name.
Johnny Garcia.
Hi, yes, we could hear you.
Just a question for Dr. Pace. So the positive test results. So if I go get tested today how long does it take to get the positive test result back? Is that 5 to 7 days like you're saying? Or is it within hours and that's how you're posting the results?
So there's two kinds of tests. There's the test that's a rapid turnaround, and Tribal Health has one of those machines, and Adventist Hospital has one of those machines. And they're very expensive, and they're used in certain circumstances, but those can turn around in an hour. Sutter has the ability to turn it around in 18 hours. They have some kind of regional thing that they're doing with that. Most of the tests are done by sending out to the commercial labs, mainly Quest, which is the biggest one. And they're pretty backed up right now, kind of nationally, because of all the demand and all the concerns because everything's rising, right? And so it's taking us usually 4 to 6 days for most of them from the time. So if you got tested today, the results would probably be back Saturday or Sunday. Possibly Monday, but hopefully before that. So yeah, if you go to the drive-in site, that's what's happening right now. Partly because what's going on is, like in the state of California, they've ramped up now to doing somewhere between 60 and 80,000 tests every day. And so it's, it's kind of phenomenal what they're processing, and it's just, they're having problems.
Okay, so like yesterday you guys posted that there was 5 new cases. So those 5 new cases were obviously tested last week, not yesterday.
Well, most of them. If somebody shows up in the hospital and they get admitted and they get tested there, so they might be urgent. But yeah, the vast majority were from last week.
Okay, that's all.
So that's part of the deal. So you're asking a really important question, which is then there's a lag time, right? So if, say those people got positive last week and then they're in contact with their family and friends, or they're at a workplace where it's being spread, then there's this lag time that goes on with all that, because then once we find out that person's positive yesterday, we get in touch with them, talk to them about all the people they've been in contact with. We get in touch with those people, tell them to go get tested, and it may be Saturday before we find out if they're positive or not. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, Jake.
All right, so the room is still open. All right, great. We had a hand come up here. Lympha? Unmute you here.
Hello?
Hello, yes, we can hear you. Please confirm your first and last name for us.
Linda Rushing.
Thank you.
I'm calling because I left a message last week with the county health department, and I left another message. I'm legally blind and I have no caregiver. And I would like to be tested because I was very, very ill February and March with many of the symptoms. And I could not get a test because there were no tests then. But I don't know if it's still important for me to get tested. I think it should be, but I can't get there without taking a cab, and I don't feel safe because I have multiple sclerosis taking a cab. So is there any way that I can get tested?
Why don't you call, I can give you some advice here, but it's a pretty public place, so why don't you call?
I left for the county health department in Lakeport. I've left 2 messages now, and I've just been waiting for a return call to make an appointment and find out how. And
okay, why don't you give me your phone number?
I don't want to do that. Is there a way I can?
Can I ask what district you're in?
I live in Clear Lake.
Clear Lake.
Then contact me, Linda. I believe that I don't believe I received an email from you, but I know I've had to.
No, I'm legally blind. I don't email.
Okay.
I called the health department in Lakeport.
Maybe give her your phone.
And I spoke to a nice lady there that said that they were going to check and see if there was a way I could get tested. That was yesterday. And I was just wondering, is that the only way is to wait for a phone call back to make an appointment or for some kind of way to come up for a blind person to get a test.
Will you call again? They're waiting for your call right now. They're sending.
I sure will. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to take up so much time,
Thank you for calling in.
but I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Sounds like it got handled.
Stay safe, you guys. Thank you for what you're doing.
And Linda, in case anything ever happens where you get disconnected or are unable to speak with them, please call my number and hopefully you can get this. It's 707-695-0834.
I can't keep it down. Is this Bruno speaking?
This is Bruno, yes.
Okay, I thought I recognized your voice. Thank you.
so
I
again,
can't
it's-
see you guys, so it's just me listening to voices.
Right, so again, it's 695-0834 and my number is a public number, call anytime.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, not both of you. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, Jake. Any other hands up?
No, there are currently no more hands up.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, there was no public comment received by email for this item or for this meeting at all today.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol. Okay, Jake, we're gonna go ahead and close the room up and bring it back to the board.
Okay.
All right. All right, any final comments or questions for Dr. Pace at this point from the board?
I did have one more question. Thank you. I was trying to remember what I wanted to ask, and it just came back. Dr. Pace, you spoke at one point about the difficulties now with so many active cases with contact tracing. I know that the state of California has drafted 10,000 people to be part of their contact tracing team. Do we have access to those people yet? Do we need to have access to those people? Has there been any kind of agreement made where if there is a need, in case our cases keep growing, that we do automatically get access? And what can we do as supervisors to make sure that you have access?
Well, yeah, thanks. I did mention it in there a little bit earlier, but it's the state does have this big program. I don't think that's quite as many people in it as they were initially promising, but they've got a very it's called Cal Connect. It's a program, and they're having a little bit of problems connecting all the pieces up with the technology. We do have a request in for 5 of those folks right now that we're waiting to hear back about. We do have some people that are trained on the program, but the program has to get kind of functional enough so that some of the local volunteers can hook into it. So and just to say too, our nurses are the main ones doing a lot of this stuff now. And there's a volunteer nurse that's really helping us out a lot, which has been a huge help. One of our nurses is retiring. Today's her last day, Chris McSorley. So we're really going to miss her because she's been a big help. And but it's so the state program, we are connected in with that, and we're actively working with it. I think that's a good point though, is if there becomes a problem in us accessing the help, then I'll let you know. And so, because maybe some pressure from your end would be helpful.
Okay. And then there is something I did speak with Dean Eichelman about, and he wasn't aware, and I heard this on Friday from Governor Newsom's little at noon with the governor speeches that he's been giving, where now I believe that because of the work with manufacturing companies to create more PPE, that now there is direct access through the state possibly for private enterprise to get PPE. Have you heard anything about that? And I just remembered that, and I haven't looked into it yet. I need to look into it. Wondering if you've heard anything about that.
I'm not aware of that. I know that they've gotten some big shipments that have come in the last week or so, last couple of weeks, and so maybe that's part of that. So no, I'm not sure about that. So if you find out something, then we ought to look into that, and let me know though.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Pace, thank you once again for the weekly update. I want to thank you and all of your department, everyone in the county that's working diligently on these things. Supervisors Battier is volunteering at the the testing sites. But it's just very important, obviously, that we just heed to the message here. It's very important: social distancing, masking, limiting your, the crowds that you're going out and being involved with. Please, and our elders and others that have conditions, please take this very seriously and hopefully minimize your travel and be as diligent as possible. We know it's a social contract as far as masking and other things at this point, and I just can't reiterate enough that right now seems to be the crunch time for everybody. So please pass that message on and do what we can. But I just want to thank everybody in your department, Denise, all the nurses, everybody, all the medical stuff. What you guys are doing for us here in Lake County is phenomenal. And once we get through this, people will really realize the battle that you guys took on. So I just want to thank you very much. And I know we got a long ways to go, but I just want to get that out there and say thank you to everybody that's helping in this situation, our nonprofits, our hospitals, everyone that are doing their part, and our constituents that are doing everything that needs to be done. So, all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Pace. All right. We're going to go ahead and move back to our, yes.
I know commonly we go right into it, but I was going to see if we could take a quick 2-minute break.
Yes, if you need to take a break, that'll be interesting. We haven't done a break in this setting at this point. So if you need a break, we're going to go ahead and take a 2-minute, let's make it a 5-minute break here. It's 1:57. Let's come back at 2:02.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we are ready to begin again.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene the meeting at Lake County Board of Supervisors, June 30th special meeting at 2:03. We're going to go back to our extra item that was put on board, 4.1. We had added it as an extra item. Now we're going to be talking about B, consideration of amendment to number 2 to the agreement between the County of Lake, the Lake County Behavioral Health as lead agency for the Lake County Continuum of Care, and Kelseyville United Methodist Church as the fiscal agent for the Hope Harbor Warming Center project for fiscal year 2019-2020. Carol, is admin on?
Yes, I'm back, but Todd Metcalf is going to present this item.
Thank you very much, Todd.
That's really loud.
So as I explained before, we are wanting to extend operations of the shelter for another month because Kelseyville United Methodist Church had initially pulled out of this, but decided at the last minute, last Thursday, to offer up another month of fiscal sponsorship for the program. As you may or may not know, this initially was just a warming center, which would have closed on April 30th of this year, but because of COVID-19 and because of the governor's loosening up of different funding streams and eligibility for COVID-19 activities, we are through Lake County Behavioral Health Services were able to fund the warming center for another 2 months because it was converted into a COVID-19 shelter. It was slated to close today. And Supervisor Brown, I'm sorry if you were unaware of this, and I do want to remind everyone that this is not a Lake County Behavioral Health Services program. We are just sort of funneling monies to it to keep it going because of our oversight of the housing continuum of care. So with this, Kelseyville United Methodist Church said, yes, we'd be up for another month of keeping the operations going, and the Hope Harbor staff will keep doing what they're doing. Again, the church is just offering, and I don't mean to say just offering, fiscal oversight is a big deal. But they had come, during this meeting last Thursday, they had said that they needed monies before July 4th, which also prompted me to think that this should be, there's some sense of urgency here, because if this thing closes, they need a guarantee of funds to keep it running. So Carol Hutchinson, our CAO, thank you, Carol, for checking in with our auditor controller's office, said, if this got approved today, the soonest they would be able to at least cut a check to keep operations going would be July 9th, if this were to be approved today. So time is of the essence. I do believe this is a legitimate extra item because of the nature of what we're dealing with here. And just for you to know that if this is approved, we are working on an exit strategy. We're going to make sure that the folks that are in the shelter will receive, resources and information, a warm handoff, so to speak, until Hope Center, which is still supposed to be open down in the city of Clear Lake, a transitional housing project by September 1. Still working on the old juvenile hall project to convert that into some sort of transitional or homeless housing. So there are things in the works, and there will legitimately be a hiccup in this because I'm sure after July 31st, there's still going to be a lag time period until we can figure out, or until something comes to fruition to work with these folks. But in the meantime, we are working on, similar to what happened with Project Room Key in the city of Clear Lake, those COVID-19 folks that were sheltering in place there. We actually got out of the, whoever's on the line here, help correct me if I'm wrong, the 10 or 11 or so participants in the program, I believe 3 or 4 of them were able to secure permanent housing. So we're sort of taking that same approach now with the COVID-19 Hope Harbor shelter in Lakeport, that if we all work together and work hard enough, some of these folks may end up being in a more permanent housing situation. So work is being done, but basically this is just kind of buying us time to work through this and do other projects on the side. So I hope that provided more clarification, but please, ask me any questions and I'll do the best I can to answer them.
Thank you, Todd.
So
Supervisor Brown.
So a couple of things. First of all, it's already been determined that it qualifies as an extra, so that we're past that. So don't worry about that. And it's not that you don't have to apologize for me not knowing. I knew about it. I'm talking about the public. That was the whole point. The public not being aware of it as an extra. And the public that I'm talking about, and you may have already addressed this with them, but I don't know that you have, so that's why I'm asking. Now, the city of Lakeport, they're quick to state that we're doing things without letting them know or giving them input, and they're impacted by this. It's at their site. They thought it was going to be over with. I've heard from different folks from the city of Lakeport over the course of time that they're
we lost you, Rob.
If we're going to be doing this, we're going to be extending it. I'm sorry?
We lost you for a minute there.
Okay. Well, my point is the city of Lakeport been in the loop on this, because that's the public that I'm talking about when we put things on as an extra without offering it up to them as well.
Yes, Supervisor Brown, rest assured that the city of Lakeport was represented at this meeting I attended last Thursday, so they should be fully aware of what's going on right now. And I see a hand raised. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jake, if we could open up to the hand, because I can't see that.
Looks like it's the city manager from Lakeport.
Yes.
What do you see that? Where am I? Okay. I don't know if Margaret wants to speak. Go ahead, Margaret. Or,
they are unmuted. They might be having audio issues. This is M. Silviera.
Yes.
Yeah. They are unmuted right now, but I am not seeing any dialogue.
Okay, well, if she gets that figured out, we'll let her chime in.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for
Yeah.
Ms. Silvera to figure out her technical issues, if I may.
Go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier. Well, let me ask, if Supervisor Brown was done, Supervisor Brown, do you want to continue on?
No, I'm finished. I just wanted to, there was an apology to me that I wasn't aware. That's not the point. It's not that I wasn't aware. I want the public to be aware as well. And so that was my concern. And I just want to make sure that the public that is the most impacted, which is the residents and the city of Lakeport, has had an opportunity to weigh in on it. That was my whole.
Mr. Chair, I have Margaret.
Okay.
Sorry, I have Margaret Silvera on audio for you.
Okay.
So, and Margaret, they should be able to hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't look like I'm unmuted, but I couldn't figure out how to do anything differently. But anyway, we have been working with behavioral health and the shelter. Yes, the group that was doing the shelter was not going to go forward, and one of the reasons was that they were not getting any assistance from the county in behavioral health or social services with the programs there. And we have 40 people, 45 I think right now, in one place at one time, and they didn't get the benefit like the people at Roomkey that had a 24/7 assistance there. So after talking to the church, I asked them if we could get some assistance, would they be interested in at least helping with the transition? Because like Todd was saying, there is people there that have been getting jobs, that have been relocated to some housing. And we have a lot of employees and volunteers that are working with the members there. I won't say a lot, but there's been at least 5 or 6 stories that I've heard of people that are moving on and doing well. And so to just cut them on the street immediately without having a transition to juvenile hall, it would be a disservice to these people that are trying hard to stay clean and to work on some new opportunities in their lives. And I know that Supervisor Scott's also been very helpful in there, helping some of the residents there or guests. So with that conversation with the church, they decided if we could get some help, they would be willing, because of big hearts they have, and that they've been working with these people and knowing the situations. They said they would go for another 30 days, and it looks like the building is probably going to be rented out on August 1st. So there would be a definite termination of the shelter at that time. And we have had conversations, and Todd and Denise Pomeroy have also said they would assist us in working with DSS and County Health and with behavioral health to help some of the clients in there that will need the help. Because without the county's assistance, my PD has spent the first couple of months, like 80% of their time has been either with the shelter or the people on the street that were kicked out of the shelter, which they deserve to be kicked out for the things they were doing. I'm not complaining about that. But that has been a huge burden for our police department and the cost of that burden on the city. So with the assistance, if the county is willing to assist us with behavioral health and the services that only the county has available, the church said they would continue the 30 days and help with the transition of these guests there. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Margaret.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I will add to that. I mean, I have been working with my staff, as I said I would at last Thursday's meeting. We have put a schedule together that we will have staff on site at the shelter 5 days a week. I'm just sorry I was not apprised of the situation before at the shelter there. We had a system set up, and it was never communicated to me that the system was broken. So we will have someone on site 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, to assist with whatever is needed through the duration of this project.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Supervisor Sabatier?
Thank you very much. And I think that what's going to be important, including now as well as the potential future over at Juvenile Hall or wherever that might be, that we look at outcomes and make sure that we're keeping track of the data, not just feeling good about what we're doing, but also making sure that we're getting the results that we're looking for. And it sounds to me that if we have some of those people already finding housing and jobs, and I've heard also from some of the staff that's working and volunteering over at Hope Harbor that there's a lot of decreases in drug addiction as well, where people are overcoming substance withdrawals, that we're truly helping people get to the next step. And so I know that this is a fluid situation. We thought we had somebody that was ready to take this on. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition and fell through, and now we're being offered another possibility. And I appreciate people stepping up and wanting to take this on and continue it, because we are taking, granted we were kind of forced to in order to meet the guidelines for local variants, but we are taking on something that we haven't taken on in such a way, and this is step one. And to just drop off and not be able to continue anything just puts people back where they started and doesn't lead to any positive conclusions for our community. And so I think that we do need to be wary on the next steps that we take to make sure that they're done correctly. But I think that this is a good step so that we can take those steps a little slower and make sure that by the end of July we have a very strong and concrete plan as to what to do, rather than having this shut down and trying to figure out where to put people and try to help people. And so I think that this is a good opportunity. I appreciate it coming to us, and looking forward to taking action on it.
Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier.
And may I just add one last piece in the background? There is a request for proposals currently out there now, soliciting folks to come and run a shelter at the old Juvenile Hall facility. That closes on July 17th. We'll see if we get any takers, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that's also happening behind the scenes. And we're hopeful that someone may apply, though the funding is only good as long as the COVID-19 declaration is in place, but monies are available for that. So all of us involved are extremely hopeful that someone may step up and hopefully take this over. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, Hope Center is, again, these aren't the end all, but there are other things happening. But if the stars align and everything falls into place, then this will be a seamless transition. But just wanting to let people know that there might be a bit of a hiccup after this is all said and done, until other programs fall into place. But work is being done. I just wanted to let you all know that.
Thank you very much, Todd. Any more questions or comments?
Yeah.
Supervisor Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Todd, for making a comment about the 17th. I was going to let everybody know that we're trying to work on that piece, but I just appreciate everybody coming together last Thursday. I know it was last minute. We actually met together in a room, kept our 6-foot distance to make sure that we were connecting, and we did have all the pieces in place. And I think that was incredibly important that we did that. And I know for myself, I was there this weekend, and the stress level, I was told, was way down because the people there did not know what was going to be happening. Today was supposed to be the closing day. There was so much up in the air. So now at least we have 30 days to try to get some assistance, some house, maybe some jobs. I went through the paperwork over the weekend trying to figure out who it is that we could help possibly in the next 30 days. I'm hoping that we do get somebody that will respond to our RFP. But if not, at least I'm thankful that it's summertime and it's not winter time. And I know they're really resilient, and they're capable of maybe trying to cover the time till we have some program in place. But I'm hoping that Hope Center will be up and running in the next couple of months, and that could be the next landing space to help these people. So I'm really hopeful that we can approve this today and have those 30 days to be able to assist.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott. Supervisor, any more comments or questions from the board?
I was
Supervisor Sabatier?
looking for a clarification, and I know it has nothing to do with this agenda, but it was mentioned by Director Metcalf. You said shelter. Is that the request on the RFP, or is it still housing navigation hub / maybe transitional facility?
The word shelter needs to be incorporated somehow in order for it to be eligible for the COVID-19 funding. So that's why I'm referring to it as such.
Okay.
Beyond that, yes, the housing navigation hub, sure. But for now, yeah, we have to be careful about what we're calling it in order to be eligible for the funding.
I'll watch my terms.
Okay.
Hard to keep track of it all.
Yeah. Okay, any more comments from the board? Question? Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up to public comment.
Joan Moss. I'd like to know, I was under the impression that FEMA was going to fund this shelter, and I would like to know what plans fell through, because I thought all the time that it was state money and federal money that was sponsoring the shelter. And now is it a COVID-19 homeless shelter? Is that what it's called? Thank you.
I don't know if Todd, you want to answer those questions?
Well, that's, yes, COVID-19 shelter is the correct terminology, because that's how we were able to finesse the funding from the state to keep the warming center open as a COVID-19 shelter. And that's what this last round of funding is speaking to the same thing. To keep the shelter open through July 31st is specific to any COVID-19 activities. So I hope that answered the question. FEMA, I don't speak that language very well. So we are only working with funds that are related to anything that has to do with COVID-19.
Thank you, Todd. Supervisor Sabatier?
And I just want to say that for FEMA, it's when we run out of state money that we can use FEMA as a potential reimbursement, which can be up to 75%, but there's no promises that we will get reimbursed whatever monies that we spend. And so right now, my personal opinion is anything that we depend on FEMA for, we need to be careful, because every county and every state of the union is probably looking for FEMA to pay them back with something. So I expect that we may have some troubles getting all the reimbursements if we stand on that and expect that to happen for us. So I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to use the real money that is eligible for us to use, and the state has given us money at this point in time. And there are also some eligible funds for homeless shelters and facilities for COVID-19 that we're going to be utilizing for this moment in time. That way it's hard cash that we can use and not just a potential reimbursement.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Sabatier. Okay, Jake, is there any more comments? Can you open up the room, or are there any hands raised?
Yes, we do have some raised hands. We have one from Michael.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, on the request itself, obviously strong support in Lakeport. The COVID-19 shelter has been hugely important, addressing needs of the homeless population. But we still see a fair number of people in the greater Lakeport community that are not being housed there. So in addition to the long-term health and housing needs of the homeless population, in terms of COVID-19 response, the COVID-19 shelter has been hugely important, with having a central place for people to get services, where people can get access to masks, where people basically can get the support they need, so that when they are interacting with the broader Lakeport community, they're able to do so safely. If there's going to be a heavy lift on maintaining those services, obviously that's something, hopefully that RFP will have some success. But this is more of a question, assuming there is an interruption of shelter services, what types of other funding mechanisms might be out there so that local community groups or public health or behavioral health itself can continue to do public outreach to sensitive populations, not just the homeless, but also our farm worker population. So I want to strongly support the item that's on the agenda. We obviously need to keep that shelter going as long as possible, but assuming there's going to be an interruption, what's the next step? What can we do to provide real-time COVID-19 response assistance, masking, hand washing stations, not just for the homeless population, but also for the farm worker population? Thank you.
I think that's a good discussion, another discussion item. Michael, I think those are all good ideas. Today what we're discussing obviously is the amendment to keep open the Hope Harbor Warming Shelter. I'll get that right. COVID-19 shelter. And, I think that some of those other questions are a longer conversation. But Todd, I see you're up on the screen again. Go ahead.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, now that we know that this shelter will most likely close on the 31st of July. We are working with all the guests there in preparation for that, because yes, if someone responds to this RFP on July 17th, chances are, I don't know, maybe they might be able to get the old juvenile hall up and running by August 1st. But if not, things will just go back to the way they were. And so if folks at the shelter qualify for certain programs and services, and by all means they would be enrolled in them, and it would just be sort of back to business as usual or unusual, however you would like to put it. But the funding, there will be a lapse in funding after this is over on the 31st. So folks will just, as I said, we're working on a warm handoff. We're going to work hard to get these people housed as best we can, and if not, we will hook them up and link them to programs and services to, sort of hobble along, so to speak, until these other monies and these other facilities are up and running. And I want to mention Hope Center again in the city of Clear Lake. That will be a real transitional housing facility. I was in a meeting earlier this week and again was told that it should be opening by the end of August or 1st of September. So it won't be a big lag if something doesn't happen in the meantime, but that's how I see it's going to play out unless someone else in this meeting has something else to offer. But that's all I know at this point.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Go ahead, Jake.
And then can I make a comment real quick?
Go ahead, Supervisor.
So I just think that one of the things that's important to speak about here, and I think that Dr. Pace alluded to it during his comments of his update on COVID-19, is this closing without something else available to us hurts us in showing the state that we still meet their local variance requirements. And so I think we need to do our due diligence to make sure that we don't drop that number below the state guidelines, or else we may have a knock on our door by the state, and then we might have to make things happen that maybe we would prefer doing differently. And so I think that while I will admit that I have not been in the conversations about Juvenile Hall or Hope Harbor as much as Supervisor Scott or other staff members such as the Director Metcalf and Director Marketan, but it's something that we need to engage with in order to make sure that we don't get any kind of burden from being below the threshold that the state of California has required of us. And right now we are above that threshold. Without Hope Harbor, we would be below it. So we need to keep that in mind as we keep moving forward as well, and to maybe look at bringing this back before July 31st and see if we can negotiate an extra week or whatever to be able to compensate for that transitional period.
Thank you, Supervisor Sabatier. Okay, Jake.
All right, so we don't have any more raised hands in the room.
Is that Dr. Pace on the bottom of the screen?
But I can unmute the floor here.
Yep, and I see Dr. Pace came up on the window there. Dr. Pace, I don't know if you have any comments.
Hi, well, yeah, I just want to totally support what Todd's working on here, and with a whole team of people that have been trying to put together. It was a little bit of a scramble as things were changing, but it seems very worthwhile to have another period of time to try to really get these folks set up and to try to get the long-term plan going. So hopefully, you know, it doesn't have to come to a screeching halt at the end of the time period there, but it does give us a little more time to work with it. And now I think the right people are at the table to try to work on this. And so, so this would be a big support for the whole COVID response for the county. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into this.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Pace. Okay, Jake, is there any more public comment?
No, there are no raised hands at this time.
Okay. We'll go ahead and open up the room. We'll see what we get there, and then we'll bring back to the board for action.
Okay. All right, the floor is unmuted. If you would like to make a comment, please state your first and last name.
Love it.
Okay, Jake, go ahead and close it up and bring it back to the board. Carol, did we have any, I think you stated it earlier, but there's no written comment on this.
Correct, none at all.
Excellent. All right, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agreement between County of Lake, County Behavioral Health, and as lead agency for the Lake County Continuum of Care, and Kelseyville United Methodist Church as the fiscal agent for the Hope Harbor Warming Center project for fiscal year 2019-20, adding 1 month of additional services in fiscal year 2020 through 2021 for the period July 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2020. Did I say that right?
Yes.
31st.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Can we do the roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Supervisor Scott?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes.
And Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move to our 6.2 item. I know we're behind schedule here, but a 1:30 p.m. item, Economic Development Workshop with county department heads.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, this is the second session of our 4 economic development workshops. And as you recall, this process began on January 22nd when your board hosted a workshop involving all department heads. At the end of that session, it was apparent that we had simply run out of time. There wasn't enough time to hear from all departments. And so Supervisor Brown suggested, and the rest of the board agreed, that we continue this process as we are doing over these 4 weeks. There were some very broad themes that came about as a result of the workshops. And in a moment, I'll show you those. Let's see. There we go. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because this is the second workshop, but I will show on 2 separate slides the priorities that were identified from that workshop. And certainly we all well know that with the limited resources we're dealing with, it's really critical that we do a great job prioritizing the work we undertake. And here's the second slide. At the close of the January workshop, we agreed we would be back doing this. And of course, the COVID crisis made that, postponed it even further until now. COVID has taken up most of our time. And in fact, the reality hitting us by virtue of COVID makes economic development an even more compelling discussion than it was before. So we're all excited to get back into the conversation today. And I'm grateful to the department heads that have waited. We're about an hour late in our start. Last week, we started with the infrastructure planning and building group. And today we move on to finance, internal services, and key services to the public or to other public agencies. I want to welcome and thank the department heads and key staff of administration, assessor recorder, auditor, controller, county clerk, disaster finance, county council, information technology, treasurer tax collector, buildings and grounds, and libraries. Clearly, the effectiveness of the departments here today are not only critical to the efficient operations of all of the rest of the departments, but many of these departments also are either key revenue drivers or they provide services that mean a great deal to the public. I'm sure that everyone is aware that following these 4 workshops, it's the intention that a task force of selected department heads, their key staff, and 2 members of your board will be formed to continue to focus on economic development continuously. Our work with economic development is getting started, and I hope some of you will be part of the task force that digs deeper into these important priorities. So we'd like to get the discussion started today by having each of the departments review some of their priorities and their barriers. And I'm pleased to say that our librarian, Christopher Veach, has indicated he will kick us off.
Okay.
Go ahead, Christopher.
Welcome, Christopher.
Get your screen out of the way.
Hello, so I'm Christopher Veach, the county librarian. So the packet info for the library details some of the ways the library has streamlined our business practices in order to continue serving the public with less staff and to better utilize volunteers. I do want to focus today on some of the ways we already serve the public and how we could expand our efforts regarding economic development. As I'm sure you know, the education and literacy of our residents is an important factor in our local economy, and the library helps out with that. For example, many of the students in our adult literacy program are improving their literacy skills specifically for employment. As well, many patrons use library resources to improve their skills or find employment. Our physical collection has materials on workforce development, such as resume guides or career test study guides, as well as business plans, legal self-help guides, or marketing. Our digital collections include similar resources, as well as training videos for various industries that can be streamed online. Patrons also use our public computers and Wi-Fi to write resumes, receive online certifications for employment, such as food handling certificates, or check out books and study guides to start or further their careers. That's just one of the ways the library positively impacts the workforce development of our area, and we could do even more with additional funding. And then much like our parks, the library is also just an important amenity that attracts people to Lake County, raises property values in nearby neighborhoods, and just improves the quality of life here in the county. With the proper funding, there are many ways our library could add even more resources for small businesses and other county departments as well. For example, our library system could provide free access through our library cards to business databases that are often a barrier for entry to the market for small business, such as segmentation and industry data through services like Reference USA or MarketLine. Other services, such as lynda.com, could provide premium self-paced courses for self-certification in multiple job fields, and training that could even be used by other departments on office software or other business practices. There are many other ways the library can contribute, such as Wi-Fi hotspot lending, more volunteer opportunities for residents, educational opportunities for children, and being a vital community partner to other organizations. The main barriers facing the library are funding. Our library system has a very lean budget to serve the entire community. When we add new things to our system, we have to make sure we are spending funds on items that will reach the most people. Another barrier around these resources is education on the use of those resources. It's not enough just to make the resources available. We also have to teach people what they are and how to use them for them to be of use. So we want to make sure any purchases we make in this area would be well used. I can expand on anything else in the packet or answer additional questions.
Go ahead, go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier.
Are we waiting for all the presentations?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do, we will go through all the presentations and then open it up for questions. I think that's the best way.
Just know I do have questions for you.
Okay. You usually got them written down, so we're good.
Okay, Mr. Chair, then if we're going to just go through the presentations, that's great. And Lars Ewing, our Public Services Director, is here to speak on behalf of Buildings and Grounds. Lars?
I'm tracking him down here. 1 second.
You can always call Carol and she can put him on the phone.
Yeah.
All right, Lars, can you give me a sound check, please?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't unmute. All right. So appreciate the time. So last week I was here for, here, quote unquote, for solid waste. And I was, public services was included in this group, as Carol mentioned. Kind of for the internal services, last week was infrastructure, and I think it's a little unique that that buildings and grounds and parks, which are a huge part of the infrastructure, it's unique that we weren't on last week, but I think it's appropriate because it's an internal service, not something that is typically a public works type of project in the lowercase public works perspective. So I'm going to break it down with parks, trails, facilities, and museums. Carol talked about just buildings and grounds, but I will be touching on the others. So parks, actually, I'm going to thank Christopher. He did a good segue there talking about what parks does for the public and how it can be an economic engine, which is that's a very large draw as an amenity for public use and largely affects property values. It also does a lot of, it kind of shapes the perceptions of a community, or at least it can, attracts businesses or deters them or detracts them from coming in. So that's, having nice parks, a good number of them, I think it offers a good draw for the public. And I am very proud of the staff that we have that maintains the parks that we have and the way that they do. So some of the future projects that we want to get done and progress thus far, trying to increase the amenities that we have at our parks. That ranges from fitness courts or fitness amenities at the parks, just simply open space, allowing some open space, dog parks. There's just constantly trying to improve them. If we don't improve them, then they are stagnating, which if you imagine parks from 50 years ago, if we don't improve those parks, imagine those same amenities there, and it just will stagnate if not fester. So I think it's important that we stay fresh. Another part of the parks that we want to try to work towards is identifying where we need parks, where they are not currently in existence in certain communities. There are some around the county, some areas of the county that do not have them. So if as funding allows, and that's a very common theme, but as funding allows, be it through grants or through our funds, trying to get parks in areas like Cobb, Clear Lake Riviera, North Lakeport, Soda Bay, Coyote Valley. There's a number of them in these community growth areas where there is not a public park, or at least a county maintained public park. So another way that the parks really spur the economy is the use of the parks for events. Aside from just the general public appeal, those events can be an economic driver. And I'll highlight, because where we are in Lake County, and particularly fishing at the lakefront parks that we have, I think that's a huge piece. And I've talked to Greg Giusti in the past about how that's a huge draw economically, tourism for Lake County, and that's something that we can really tap into. And while there are no large-scale projects currently going on, we applied for a couple of grants for the state, a lot of money statewide, but it was also very competitive. The city of Lakeport was successful with a grant there at what will be called Lakefront Park next to Library Park. While we don't have any large-scale improvements, we're again really trying to constantly refresh them. On the trails, I separate those out from parks because in as much as a lot of the trails are on county parks, there are opportunities for trails to be in locations that are not county property or not at least a county park. And that can be an additional tourism draw and an additional, at least a different sector. That can tap into, not just those who would go to a park to picnic or play in the playground, but, hiking, equestrian, that can be a big draw. Right now, we do have some level of work being done on trails, which is some planning and CEQA that is in progress for new trails up on Mount Konocti, expanding the use of Mount Konocti. We have done some work as much as we can in some other areas for trails. Some of the barriers there, it is property that is not owned by the county and concern by the property owners about the trails on private property. So allowing public access onto a trail that is located on private property, which has been done and is done in other areas, but that has been a concern of private property owners that we've been in discussions with. Transitioning over to facilities. I think I'm coming from Public Works. I think it's similar to roads in the sense that the challenge there is a deteriorating infrastructure that simply needs to be maintained, and as it deteriorates even further, the money required to maintain it just continues to escalate. My staff, buildings and ground staff, are wizards. They do what they can to maintain it, hold it together, and in a lot of ways improve them. The primary improvement that they've done here recently, even though it's not front and center, it's a huge money saver, and that is energy efficiency projects. Mostly the stuff that you won't see. When people think energy efficiency, they think, putting out solar arrays, and what I'm talking about are lighting retrofits, heating and ventilation and air conditioning upgrades, just making the buildings themselves more efficient with what they do, not so much where the power comes from. In as much as the power production is important, that is not the solution. Turning to solar is not the solution. We get a lot more bang for our buck with the small scale facility upgrades that our staff has largely already completed. But we're not done, and we continue to work towards that. We do want to tap into the things that are that exceed our capabilities with staff. So that is in the works with an energy savings conservation program or contract. So that is being worked on, albeit it does. There are a lot of front burner projects that get put to the back burner, and unfortunately there was a slight delay, but we're back up and running as much as we can with that. Now, quickly transitioning to museums. Museums, is very similar to parks in the sense that it's an amenity for public use, provides recreation, education, and history lessons. There's just a lot to be learned from the museums. Our curator, all the staff at the museums, they love what they do, and the people that are going to the museums, they come out of those refreshed. So what are we doing to help with the economy? I think keeping them open. We've gone from 2 museums to 3. I have a new museum in the last few years in Middletown into the county system, and that's a very big deal. And ensuring that they stay fresh. I'll say that, even though they are history lessons, just the way that they are displayed, it constantly puts a new face on those museums internally. And I applaud the staff for doing that. And as a segue, well, at least building upon that, one of the next projects that our museum curator is really excited about doing is developing virtual tours and exhibits, so that even if you can't be in the museum physically, you can visit it virtually. Ironically enough, this was already in the works planning prior to COVID, so it's very timely, and it won't happen overnight. So we just wrapped up a grant application, and we're very hopeful that will come to fruition. A lot of that's the big progress. The barriers to be not beat a dead horse, but the insufficient funding. Museums it is the barest bones operation that is in public services funding wise. I mean, it operates on a shoestring budget, and staff does a great job of doing what they can. But it's a lot of the questions are what does it take to run a museum, and it's not so much buying a whole lot of new stuff, but it's very, very challenging with a shoestring budget, but they do a great job with what they can. So just to wrap this up on what supports I might need to overcome any barriers, I think marketing is a big piece to bring people to those amenities, the parks, the trails, museums, facilities is a unique environment because that truly is internal to the facilities that people use. It's not so much a draw to the public, but really marketing those, which is I know a challenge to spend that money, but it's kind of an if you build it, they will come approach. So we do have parks, we can create the trails and get the museums, but getting the word out there of what we have, I think that could be a big support to help us advertise what we have. So to also really to wrap this up though, and I'm sorry for belaboring the point, but to better serve the public with the services you provide, just to answer that question, it's a big piece is modernizing our equipment and facilities. That's both on the facilities, the buildings and ground side, but also the others. And that will help to minimize staff call-outs. We can service rather than proactive service rather than a reactive repair. So it's just getting out in front of the new times, so to speak, and that is really primarily on the facility side, but I think it applies to all the other entities, parks and museums, where we can have a good understanding of what our needs are, whether it's a facilities maintenance management plan or a capital improvement plan for the big picture projects. So I will wrap it up, and I am I do need to indicate that I have a project that is relatively urgent that I need to head out for a site visit. I'm hopeful to leave, and so I leave my office here, and I'm happy to answer any questions now if you don't mind. And I'm sorry for the other department heads to ask this. I could even call in later from the road to answer questions. I don't want to be so selfish to take up all the time now and make others wait, but I am trying to get to the road for a project.
I guess I would ask the board, he's got something that he's got to do. Would there be a time where you could check in individually as board members with Lars to allow him to get out in the field, or?
I think that I will make my comments public later on, but then I will call Lars individually to get answers from him, because I think it's important to get the public involved in our discussions of economic development. That way we can have a much more open discussion of what's going to work, what's not going to work. So I'll do both.
Yeah, I can reach out to him.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that, and I apologize if it wasn't urgent.
No need for apology, obviously. Our agenda went on longer, an hour, past where we were at, so clearly understand, Lars.
Thank you.
Chair, with that, I'll thank Lars, and I'd like to ask if Richard Ford, our assessor recorder, would speak next. As you know, his role is paramount to the county in terms of driving revenue for the county general fund. So Rich, can you unmute yourself and speak, or Jake, can you unmute him?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Hello,
I've unmuted myself. So I just go through and kind of emphasize what Carol just said is we basically, even though we are a county office, we essentially fund indirectly through property tax. We fund the schools, we fund the cities, and we fund the counties. So we're very important when it comes for those stability of those, basic offices. Most people move into an area, similar to what Lars said about the parks, they move into an area because there's really good schools. That helps maintain and stabilize property values, which in the end usually funds many programs. As far as a couple of projects we have on the horizon, we have on the recorder side, which has been in the works now for a while, we have an e-recording. You guys have heard about it in previous times when I've spoken, e-recording for recorded documents. It's about a 2-year process, and I have just recently finished off my final draft and getting ready to present it to you guys in the next couple meetings to allow me to basically go through and set up contracts with outside third-party clearing houses to allow for that processing. That streamlines, it makes more efficient for our business and people that record documents, which a lot of times is title companies or other legal documents that have to be recorded with our office. That is a much more efficient way to handle that. And a lot of other counties are already ahead of us on that. But because of other different things we had in our office, we are going to get ready to start that within about 2 years. So that's as far as challenges and barriers. The staff training, because of our pay, our staff training and experience that they come to us is a lot of times very low. The e-filing takes a certain level of computer experience, a certain level of network experience. We train on those to try and gain that experience Monday through Thursday in the morning and also at the end of the day, because we work basically start at 7 in the morning, end at 6. And so on those off public hours, we train substantially to try and get us prepared. So when we actually go live with this in about 2 years, our staff will be prepared to take it on and make it efficient without too many hiccups. As far as challenges with that, many of the other agencies, meaning other counties, have already implemented this. This is going to take some outside training and taking people to other counties, making sure we can, prepare for the pitfalls. This is a pretty major undertaking. So we'll need some support with that. As far as outside travel right now, that's not going to be possible. Hopefully the COVID-19 is over by the time we have to get out there and actually go. When it comes to the assessor side, as I told you before, property tax basically pays for about 50 to 55% of the county budget. So my background is in finance. And when it comes to one thing that really, really helps economic development is financial stability. It does not help when you have big swings in your budgets. It doesn't help when you have big swings in your economy. So as far as when the office is behind, which it is still behind, I inherited it behind, and it's essentially been behind for roughly about 12 years. And I've been on for about 6 years. What essentially happens there is the budgets are based off of mainly the property tax closed, the tax roll closed, and I just closed one of them. When that closes, basically we're closing the past year if we're current. In the past, we've had multiple backlog, which we've caught up on a substantial amount of that. The problem with the backlog is it becomes a problem this way, is if, let's say we have a recession right now and we basically are not current, the information you're going to get to prepare a budget on and actually process your budget is not going to be current. And so you're not going to see the effects of that recession until we get caught up. And so the problem there is what you as decision makers, you got lagging information. And so it doesn't help your budgets. It's not streamlined. It's not an efficient way to manage it. But that's how important it is to make sure that the finance office, not just my office, but the other two offices that take part in property tax and as well as other finance issues is supported. That's how important it is. Otherwise, what's going to happen is your recession is going to happen. You're not going to have current information. 2 years later, when we finally catch up on that downturn for property tax values, it then will hit you at that point. And so you'll essentially be hit with a recession outside of a recession. Not a very efficient way to handle that, and that's very bad for the local economy. As far as what we're behind and what we can actually help with the budgets and actually for that stability, we're behind our Prop 8s. So let me explain Prop 8s a second. When you have a recession, and a lot of our Prop 8s date back to the last Great Recession, 2008, 2009. During that time frame, we, by rules that we have, if they apply for a decrease in value and the market substantiates that, we will decrease that value. Then in turn, when the market increases, we will bring it up to market, whatever percentage that is, as fast as we can when the market recovers. The market has recovered since some of those values, but we still have Prop 8s to work. And so that is really, to be honest, that is value that's out there that can be supporting the budgets. The other thing that we have out there is new construction. A lot of these things we inherited. I should say I inherited about 6 years ago. We've made inroads on all of this, especially with the project that I worked with the CAO last year on some overtime, and that definitely put a dent, especially on the Prop 8s and some of the new construction. We started off last year, I think over about 6,000. I think we're about 4,000 plus on new construction items. New construction is bad all around if we're behind. Number one, we do not get the new construction on the roll. So think about somebody who builds a house. So they build a house a year ago. We should be putting it on the roll. We should get the property tax value of that. But if we are behind on that, what ends up happening is not only do we not get it on the roll to help the budgets, and this means the schools, the cities, and the county, but we also get the delay up to the possibility of 4 years for them to get 4 years worth of escaped taxes that are usually due within a very short amount of time. I personally hate escapes. They're not good for budgets, they're not good for financial stability, and they're not good for the economy as a whole, because a lot of the agencies that I just described are some of our largest employers within the county. So that's basically how important it is, and how important it is to make sure that we have proper staffing so we can get some of this backlog done and get us to make sure we're nice and current. Our staffing is fairly decent right now, but our experience is extremely low. We should be having people that are 5 to 10 years in the seats. I came into the office about 6 years ago. I'm one of the longest standing appraisers in my office. Most people have within each position about a year. That is woefully light. So that's some of the biggest things that we can do. Now, we get a lot of bang for our buck because we train when we bring on new staff, but because of our salaries, we are not bringing in experience. We're bringing them in at zero, and with a substantial amount of training, internal and external, because we need external training. We are certified by the state. Through all those channels, we're able to speed it up slightly, and we have sped it up, but there's no easy way to get there. So it emphasizes again, for not just my office, but for the treasurer and also for the auditor, how important it is to support the finance offices. Because to be honest, we're the guys that are going to either handle your revenue, help produce your revenue, and we're the guys that usually are pretty efficient on helping make sure that you have stability within your finance realm. So I will kind of leave it at that. I know you're going to wait for questions at the end.
Thank you, Richard.
No problem.
At this point, I'm asking if Kathy Saderland, our Auditor Controller, would speak. Jake, can you look for her and unmute her? Looks like you're good, Kathy. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Kathy Saderland, your Auditor Controller. I'm hoping you can all hear me.
Yes.
So I have presented in my packet submittal so a little bit of insight as what I believe economic development involves with regard to a finance office and my office particularly. And so in going through that, I kind of outlined in the very last two paragraphs of my submittal what I believe the role of the Auditor Controller's Office is. And in looking at that, I wanted to highlight some key areas that directly touch on economic development or your government economic engine, if you will. And I want to be brief because there's a lot of things that I could share here, but I just want to be brief on a couple things. So all of the grants the county receives from the state and federal government require financial reports that are either certified or prepared by the Auditor Controller. And this includes quarterly and annual reports to receive funding, the county annual audit, the county single audit, all of which, if there's a deficiency noted, those federal and state funds would not be available. They would be withdrawn or they would be required to be repaid. This infusion of federal revenue aids our local economic engine, and last year that was in excess of $107 million. We're on target to meet or exceed that this year. The County of Lake has also maintained an audit status of an unqualified opinion or a clean opinion for the annual audit prepared by my department. And this is an indicator that your accounting methods and reporting are in compliance, which allows the county additional funding, loan and bond opportunities, which would not otherwise be available if our financial condition and reporting were out of compliance. We also maintain constant and consistent payment to local vendors through our accounts payable function, which infuses cash into the local economy. We maintain constant and consistent payment to our employees through our payroll function, which infuses cash into our local economy. And both of these are pretty heavy lifts given the complete physical shutdown of our offices, not just from this pandemic, but from the Mendocino Complex fire in 2018 when the courthouse was shut down for well over, I think it was a week or two. And this infusion into your local economy is about $163 million in 2018, and again, we're going to meet or exceed that in 2020, fiscal year ending 2020. Rich also talked about the property taxes and his role in that and the assessment, and the treasurer will probably touch on her role with regard to the collection. My office allocates those property taxes. So those property taxes, including the voter-approved direct charge assessment fees, churns within the local economy. And this year it's $78 million in the ABH secured taxes alone, with $9.4 million in direct charges for this fiscal year. So those are, I kind of wanted to touch on those because it's hard when you talk about economic development and you talk about your finance offices. You know, we don't necessarily create it, but we sure do work it as good as we can, and we make sure that it's spent and reported appropriately, and that we can maximize it whenever possible. So some of my specific goals and deliverables to you for the upcoming year that hopefully you consider them related to economic development are to continue to enhance the county's fiscal health by timely, accurate, and transparent financial reporting. And this will be accomplished by timely review and signing of department required financial reports to state and federal agencies, preparation of our annual audit and single audit within required timelines, and support departments in their accounting methods to provide revenue retention. We will continue to produce the expected payments to vendors and employees for local economy cash infusion, and this will be accomplished by payments to vendors at least one time per week, payments to employees on schedule twice per month. We will assist with development and implementation of a countywide system of electronic credit card acceptance, and we will complete the finance system conversion to cloud. I'm not sure that any of you know, but we are in the middle of a pretty significant conversion of the county finance system in the middle of everything else that is going on. So those are kind of, I don't really want to go through barriers, challenges, and all of that, because, you know, as I stated in my submittal, I take it very seriously that our role is to assist in maximizing revenues available to departments and to provide for accounting and transactional data for citizen and business confidence in the proper and appropriate use of service revenue as well as taxation revenue, and also to provide data to assist your board in your leadership and direction towards strengthened economic reality and forecasting. So that's all I have for this economic development, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Since we're kind of on a roll with our financial departments, I'd like to next go to Barbara Ringen, our treasurer tax collector. Barbara, are you here?
It looks like Barbara is in the room, but I'm not seeing a audio device for her. Actually, hold on, maybe she's one of these phones. Is this by you by chance, Barbara?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay. Hi. This is Barbara Ringen, Treasurer Tax Collector. I'd first like to start with our project descriptions. We have approximately 3 that we've been working through. So the first one, of course, is our to conduct our tax auctions on a regular basis. I know we've talked about this many times, definitely over the last year, but I think it's one of the most important functions in our office at the time. Unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic and the governor requesting us that we postpone all tax sales, the tax sale that we had scheduled for May, unfortunately, we had to postpone that sale. We are looking to conduct that sale in May and October of this year, and we will be offering the same parcels that we offered in May, those that have not been redeemed. And if we are able to proceed with that sale, we will proceed and move on to a second sale for this next fiscal year, most likely in May of 2021. The barriers that we potentially might see is if the governor does mandate that we postpone another tax auction, but we're hoping that that does not occur. Administration has provided us with enough staff support for associated research for that sale. So I think with this support, we should be able to move forward and overcome any barriers to conduct a tax sale, second tax sale in 2021. Once our tax sales do start occurring on a regular basis, we believe more taxpayers will be encouraged to redeem their properties. We'll also be in a better position to do more outreach with property owners prior to us offering their properties at tax sale. The next item I'd like to talk about is to implement processing our checks automatically to the bank. This is one of our most common complaints from the taxpayers. We currently, due to staffing, we're not able to increase the payment processing time because we generally receive thousands of payments in a very short period of time. But we do believe we will be able to, by implementing the Check 21 process, be able to send the payments or send the checks to the bank in a much faster process, which will definitely make the check cashing process faster. We don't anticipate very many barriers to this. We have been working with our check processing vendor to meet any requirements that our bank has. And we do expect to implement this no later than the end of 2020. Once this process is in place, we feel that this will largely resolve any complaints from the public regarding this issue. Then the third project is there's sometimes misunderstanding from the taxpayers as far as their tax bill and the process. So staff has developed, and we're working through a draft of our frequently asked questions and informational handouts that we will post online. These handouts will include detailed information on the annual tax cycle, the do's and don'ts related to the annual bills, as well as information regarding avoiding penalties and also what authority our office has to waive penalties. It'll also go over the penalty application process if needed. We anticipate having these handouts distributed by the end of August 2020. And the barriers to this, we don't really see any barriers at this time because we've been working on this project for quite a while, so we don't feel that there will be any barriers. The advantage to this is by providing this information online and on our counters, taxpayers will become better educated and reducing the frustration that sometimes they might have in understanding the tax process. I believe that is everything I have at the moment.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I wondered if we could go next to Shane French, our IT director.
Yes.
I did happen to see him sneak out of the room real quick.
Can we get him off mute?
Oh, sorry. I don't. He walked out of his office real fast.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Then could we go to Anita Grant?
Oh, sorry. I actually muted you, Anita. I'm gonna unmute you again. Oh, I'm sorry. I did it again.
Okay?
You're here, Anita. Thank you.
All right, good. All right. Okay, so this is Anita Grant, County Council. Initially, when taxed with this, I was thinking really, what our our involvement as a department really is in economic development. But as you all know, economic development occurs every time somebody pays a tax bill here locally or shops locally, because that's sales tax. So economic development occurs in many ways. And generally, in terms of developing a plan, you're looking at very specific targeted goals, whether it's big objectives in terms of growing the economy, providing infrastructure, working on workforce development, all of those things, incentives for various plans, all of those things fall within your boards and the county's purview to some degree. What my office does is we work very closely with departments and elected officials in terms of putting projects together, creating ordinances, programs, contracts. Sometimes we have to do a lot of historical digging, going back years to figure out where an error may have occurred or to explain why an action was taken in order to then move forward. And we do a great deal of that. We also work hard to try to offer alternatives in those circumstances where the laws surrounding the movement of a public entity such as a county can restrict certain actions. So it's what I always call a plan B. In terms of obstacles, as I noted in my papers, time is always the obstacle. It is the enemy of small jurisdictions because there's never enough staff, never enough money. So what I would suggest in terms of moving forward, and these aren't really so much my office's projects as projects with which we'd be happy to help, which is streamlining efforts. We've talked about improvements in streamlining when it comes to big development projects. I think I've mentioned before, Public Works has a very simple checklist process that they use when they do a road closure for a special event. It's a very simple process, but it is actually foolproof. It ensures that everyone who has to weigh in on the event has done so and when. And when I get the entire package to review for insurance and a few other issues, it's actually about a 5-minute review because everything is so well packaged. It's that same kind of streamlined checklist approach to ensure that with development projects that require inter and intra-agency approvals, that could be accommodated to allow for that type of check and balance that I think would allow things to move faster without forsaking accuracy and thoroughness. Another thing is in regard to contracts. There are opportunities for a regional approach to certain contracts or shared approaches to contracts. Rich Ford spoke earlier. He has done a contract, and it has to do with using appraisal services for a property that is shared by Sonoma and Lake County and using the same appraiser. That works an economic benefit to the county. It also gets the work done faster because here's someone who already knows the project. And there are certainly ways to accommodate that. Another thing is the job order contracting that many counties do, which is, essentially a process that allows for unit price contracting for regular maintenance, repair, refurbishment of county infrastructure and building facilities. Some places use it for massive guardrail projects, electrical, construction. It allows you to enter into competitive bidding for multiple projects all at once. You might see a contract for remodeling public restrooms, re-roofing a pump station, along with various repair projects. LA County, for example, uses it in conjunction with its CBE, its Community-Based Enterprise Program, and actively encourages local businesses to participate in job order contracting as a local job opportunity for them and some stability in terms of building a business. So there's a number of things like that I'd love to be involved in, and I have ideas. I'm happy to broach them with whoever might want to listen. But those are the types of things that I think could be done to fight the biggest enemy to economic development, which is having the time to take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. And now if we could go with Shane French, our IT director. Shane, are you back with us?
Hey there for a minute. I apologize, board. Just really quickly, you know, when Carol mentioned that this meeting was coming up, I've been kind of, I guess, nervous about what I have to say, because I feel like ever since I've been a department head, my focus has not been on economic development specifically. You know, I feel like I've been kind of reflecting on it, and I very much feel like we've been in survival mode for so long, and I realized that my priority over these several years has really been on just making sure that county operations can continue where information technology is concerned. You know, we spent a lot of time trying to cut costs, streamline operations, and protect the data that we manage, and that really has been my focus. You know, I know that I wrote on our submittal that, you know, we do have a few projects such as the credit card acceptance and e-signatures and a few other things, but you know, the reality is nothing that we do is truly driven by our own designs here in the department. Really everything that we do is complementary to what the other departments are doing. So, you know, I would very much like to come in and tell you what we have some major economic development initiatives happening here in IT, but you know, I apologize, we really don't. You know, we're very much focused on managing, maintaining, and protecting what we have. And but that being said, I'm very much interested in participating in any way that we can, certainly in the future. So happy to entertain any questions that you have for me on that, but that's really all I have for you at the moment.
So Shane, I appreciate your perspective, and I'm glad you said it, because it is the reality that it has been difficult all these years for departments to think in terms of growing things, because our revenue streams have been so limited that many of our general fund departments have been conditioned to do more with less for so many years. I know your board is well, very, very familiar with that fact. So I'll speak just very briefly for the administrative office. And again, we're just talking about economic development at this moment. We've made some pretty good progress in the past couple of years. Collecting TOT revenues from the vacation rental industry was a high priority when I landed in the administrative office. And after a lot of hard work, we've made a tremendous amount of progress in that area. We work with a firm that's helped us to identify non-reporting businesses, and we've been able to get those revenues flowing to the county as they should be. We also supported the creation of the Tourism Improvement District, which is a win-win for Lake County and our cities, because we now have a standalone stakeholder group has a modest funding source that can focus on economic development, tourism, and marketing. We've done a lot of work in the area of cannabis tax collection, and certainly a lot more effort to go. But this is a very promising industry for Lake County, and so we just appreciate having been a part of that. And again, these are just some of the highlights. I'm not going to go over everything we included in our worksheet, but your board is also aware that our office has supported the Lake County Community Risk Reduction Authority, and also its correlation to the Firewise groups, and hopefully in time merging more of the efforts of the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan. But we assisted in getting the Risk Reduction Authority up and on its feet with the belief that there would come a time when the Risk Reduction Authority also had its own funding and staffing. And that hasn't come together as quickly as we had hoped. So it continues to take a good amount of staff time from the administrative office. And it would appear that the partner agencies have that ongoing expectation that administrative office staff time support that. That's something we hope your board will look at and determine if that's a priority for staff's time in the coming months and years. And I certainly don't want to dismiss the importance of assessing wildfire risk. That's not the point of my comments, but the intent really was that the Risk Reduction Authority would stand on its own 2 feet. And so more needs to be done in that area. I guess one of the greatest issues that we've all talked about, although we're not talking specifically about what our needs are in terms of staff, but your board is well aware that staff time is limited. And so one of the greatest things that we need, I think we probably all need from you, is what are the priorities with respect to economic development. That came up a little bit last week, using the analogy of trying not to eat the elephant, but biting it off in bites where we can actually get things done. I think we would also appreciate greater clarity in terms of the oversight relationships between administration and departments. We work very well with departments, but there are times that we feel like we may frustrate the effectiveness of those departments because we have lots of needs and requests from them. And so again, the area of prioritization for all of us, I think, would be very helpful. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is the importance of enhancing more of our processes to become digitized. And we've made some serious progress by virtue of the pandemic, expanded in ways that we didn't think we could prior to that, but we sure have a long, long way to go. We're still knee-deep in lots of old records, not only in the administrative office, but in many of our offices. And it's very difficult to find things. It's been very challenging to organize things that are literally piled up for decades. And so a great deal of work would be beneficial in that area. So I'll wrap it up for now as department head comments and turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking your time today. And once again, I apologize, we were behind schedule. So we're going to go ahead and bring it back to the board. And I know I've seen a lot of the board members writing down questions and other things. So I'll go ahead and Supervisor Scott, I'll go with you.
Okay. Going back to Carol's question about what we can do to, prioritize, I think technology, that's the key right here, is we need to make sure that we are doing everything we possibly can to use technology. I'm excited to hear that Barbara, the tax collector, is using technology for cashing those checks. One question I have with that, I'm excited that we're moving that direction because I think that it will definitely help with some of the phone calls and be able to make sure we know exactly how much money we have coming in, and our constituents. I know it frustrates them sometimes when checks are held too long. That program we have, is that on a percentage of checks or is that a flat out fee? I don't know if Barbara's still there.
Hi.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Hi. To answer that, it's per check, but it will be less expensive. Currently, we utilize Brinks to pick up the checks along with the cash. So it will be less expensive for the county once we move to that system.
Thank you. And then Rich, I had a question. He said that when he took over 6 years ago, he was 12 years behind. Where are we kind of sitting now? How much have we caught up? Because I know, I believe you've caught up more than that 12 years.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wasn't sure if I was unmuted. So basically when we caught up 12 years, I think I started, we have different buckets. One of our main buckets we were really behind on at that point. We were behind on most of them, but we had substantial from prior years as far as transfers. Now transfer is usually a change of ownership. And then on the current year with the staffing we had very limited staffing. And so we were struggling on trying to just actually close the roll. And at a certain point, I think it was about 3 years after I got here, we actually spilled over, it was about 1,500. Currently, where I sit, and I'm going to be closing the roll hopefully on the 9th of this month, we are sitting at approximately, for the transfers alone, approximately 300. That is the lowest during my time frame. So transfers have caught up substantially, even though we lack experience greatly. But we are very well, very far behind on like new construction. Like I said, we have about 4,000. To give you perspective on what 4,000 means, traditionally on transfers, we do anywhere from about 3,000, 3,500 is about the highest of sales of transfers of property in any given year. So we have 4,000 plus new construction out there. So we essentially have an entire year's worth of volume in new construction alone. So we still have these big buckets, even though we've beaten down a lot of our smaller buckets, and the transfers being one of the bigger buckets we've actually made a lot of inroads in during my time. But we still have these big buckets that are going to take a substantial amount of time. That emphasizes how important it is to not let one of the financial offices to get behind, because when they do, we currently, while we sit here, properties are being bought and sold. And so the volume never stops for me, for the treasurer, for the auditor. It is continual. So if we get behind, we have to do the current plus try and catch up on all the past. And it takes years and years and years to catch up. As you can see, I'm 6 years into it with a lot of really big improvement, and I probably have 4 to 5 more years to go before I feel like I'm all the way there.
Great. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, yes. And then my next question actually would be to Lars and Christopher, but Christopher is the one that's, I think, still with us. I know the museums and the libraries depend on our nonprofits. Each of you have an entity that helps bring money in from the outside. Are your nonprofits looking at different ways to be able to continue fundraising with the fact that we are in the COVID pandemic, and that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult? Because I know you rely on that for materials and such.
Hi, this is Christopher. I can't speak for Lars, but I know for the Friends of the Library and other groups, some of them have been continuing to meet and explore different ways that they can do their fundraisers. For instance, the Lake County Literacy Coalition is still looking at still doing some kind of vineyard run in the fall. I guess there's some kind of virtual run that they might be trying to do. For the Friends of the Library, they haven't met yet, but we did recently update their website so they can take PayPal donations over the internet. But yeah, that is a very big cause of concern for us. It's great that we have these outside groups that do fundraising for the library and for our materials because it's sorely needed, but they are going to have to update the ways that they do that.
Okay, well, I think you need to make sure that you're letting the supervisors know what you're doing so we can help make sure that the community knows of the need that's out there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all the questions I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Tina. Supervisor Sabatier?
Thank you very much. So I think that there's a lot of potential with a lot of the folks that are talking to us from different departments here. I'm very much looking forward to the day that we create the ad hoc committee where we can actually create substance out of these conversations and get to the part where we create action. I hope it happens sooner than later, but these conversations are happening and they are insightful. I'll start with the library. I'm going to go in order that we heard from our directors. I love what Director Veach is doing over for our library system. Going online, especially during COVID-19, was already something that he had begun and he was continuing to do, making it eligible for people to get library cards while they were sheltering in place. So obviously he's thinking ahead and he's taking action to make sure that there's still access to our library. And it's really important, as he pointed out, for literacy purposes, educational purposes, and whatever. And so he said something that I've talked to him multiple times, which is actually a really, really popular program at the Santa Rosa Library or Sonoma County Library System, and that's the hotspot lending. And with our discussions that we've had about broadband internet and also some discussions I've had with certain schools during COVID-19 shelter in place virtual school that our students had to deal with, having hotspot lending would be really tremendous to help our students make sure they have access. Right now, nobody is truly certain as to what our school year is going to look like. Some schools are talking about hybrid. Some schools are trying to look at going all out and be in the facility and in a classroom. And of course, there's going to be some parents that are going to opt out and say, no, I'm going to do the homeschooling or the independent study or whatever they're going to call it, because maybe their child is more high risk than others. And so I think we're going to have a very strange school year this year. And I think that offers a lot of opportunities for a library. And I don't know if our library system has necessarily gone and done presentations at schools, but I think this year more than ever, it would really benefit our library system to get as many of our students and our school system to get a library card. So on the days that they're not in schools or on the days they're doing hybrid, that they still have access to that much material through our library system, whether that's online or whether that's directly physically going into our library system and accessing that stuff. Because if they're not allowed on the school campus, they're not going to be allowed on the school campus because of the hybrid model that they may adopt for this year. So I think that's some great opportunities for our library right there, and not sure if that's already happening with our library system, but just some suggestions. Love to hear from Chris to see if he has any feedback on that.
We do work with our schools. Every year we visit them multiple times. For some elementary schools, we visit with Storytime readers that come to classes and do special readings and promote the library. And then for our summer reading program that happens every year, normally we would visit classrooms. That didn't happen this year, obviously, but it's something that we would like to continue in the future. For the hotspot lending, I'm in the process of figuring out how that will work for the county. I'm talking with vendors to see which devices would provide the best coverage. But the biggest challenge, as always, is funding. I'm seeking grant funding, but when it's something like hotspots, which require a service contract, that does make it difficult to have that kind of consistent funding that would be needed to support that program going into the future. But it is something I'm looking into and trying to make work here in Lake County on my limited budget.
Right, and I remember our emails back and forth. The actual seed money to get this started was not that good. Was not that great. It was the continuous funding for the connection that was more of an issue, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
Right. And I knew you were going to our schools. I meant specifically to get students signed up for library cards rather than just talk to them, because I think right now being more abrasive in getting them connected to our library system is going to be useful as they go into this hybrid model of education, where they're not going to have access to their library because maybe it's an A-B type of day where only students in the B group are allowed to go to school today, or else there's too many students on campus and social distancing can't happen. So just an idea to put out there that maybe we want to push a little bit more for the library card, and the schools maybe are going to be more open to that this year than ever, to say, yes, this is what we want to do.
Yes. That has been part of our conversation with schools. Often when we visit classrooms, we send ahead library card applications for them to take home. Parents are ultimately responsible for the materials their child picks up, take out. So that is a hurdle there that we need to, it's unfortunately not as easy to just give the child a library card. Their parent does have to be part of that process. But now that we have online cards, I did provide information to the school districts during the COVID crisis that they could send home to let people sign up for cards online. So that might be a solution there as we go forward.
Okay. I think that we might see some new opportunities coming up this year. We'll see what it looks like. Next, we have public services. I just wanted to express some of the ideas on some of the things that were discussed. I think our parks are absolutely one of our attractions here, whether it's for locals or those that are coming here for tourist reasons. I think anytime, anywhere that there's a park, it's a place for people to stay and enjoy. We have beautiful parks. I know that we did try out for the Prop 68s. Unfortunately, I don't think we received anything, but I'm sure we will try again. There is a second wave of funding that's going to come out soon. But I think what's important, especially in this day and age where everyone's trying to either work from home, go to school from home, is maybe look at Wi-Fi in our parks. And I know that that unfortunately is kind of a rare situation that we have, but I think if you go to very the normal tourist attractions that everybody would think of, there's typically a public Wi-Fi available in their parks. And I think that that would change the atmosphere and the culture of our parks, and I think people would stay and enjoy our parks for different reasons, and I think that would be very useful. Also, I talked about it last week, directions to our parks. When I'm coming into Lake County, I see our sign that says "Welcome to Lake County," but then I don't really see directional signs, and I think that we could do better in directing people to our state parks, directing people to our county parks, directing people to our museums, which was discussed as well. Things like that. And I think that until you're about a tenth of a mile away, you don't know that those things even exist. And so you almost have to be right there to be able to know that they're there. And so I think we could do a better job at that. And I think that I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I think that's also web presence of all of those things make a difference as well. Trails, I was going to ask and will ask Lars, I believe that our county property for the landfill, that it is adjacent to BLM land, and I think that we really need to push for trails. I know that Supervisor Crandall and I have had discussions with Rebecca Wong, who is from the Bureau of Land Management as well as the U.S. Department of Forestry, to talk about trails and other activities going in the National Monument. But I think that if BLM land is right behind our property at the landfill, that we need to look at trails that go right into Cache Creek Wilderness, which is an amazing area as well to the east of us. And I think that those would also be good attractions and good access direct from the center areas of our county rather than going out towards Colusa and then eventually finding those trails. I know he spoke about energy efficiency projects, and I will say that I am very worried budget-wise about the impacts of energy costs, especially if we're looking at doing any kind of energy efficiencies that drop the cost, that's great. If we're looking at energy efficiencies in the sense of putting up solar panels, that's great too, but that might only be temporary, because in October, unless things have changed, PG&E will change their peak hours for the cost of electricity. So right now, if you buy electricity from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., it's high priced, and that's why you can sell it for a high price as well when you have solar panels, and that's why you can reduce your bill. But that's about to change to 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., which means that you will pay low price for when we're here during the day and pay high price during the evenings. This will mean that we don't get paid back as much for our solar panels that are being utilized as well. And so PG&E is trying to hit their bottom line so that they don't have to be in the red. They want to remain in the black. And so we may be looking at energy efficiency strategies that are based in today, but not necessarily based on what is going to change tomorrow. And I want us to make sure we're prepared for that, or else the costs may really impact us if PG&E or energy costs go up. So I'm very nervous about that. So I'll be having those conversations as well. I already said marketing to parks, trails, and facilities. I think that Director Ewing hit that right on the head. And I will be talking to him as well about the full update on dredging, because I think our harbors are important for tourism as well, and the less access there is to our harbors, the less potential we have for those facilities. I'm going to move on to the assessor's office, and I just want to have a point of clarification with Director Ford. for the new construction, so let's say it was a bare land and let's say it's valued at $3,000 for the bare land. 1% of that is the property taxes, and let's just say that that's all. There's no additional anything else on there. If a house was built on there and all of a sudden it goes to 200,000, we are still right now collecting the tax on 3,000 versus the 200,000 because we haven't caught up with new construction. Am I correct in that understanding?
You're correct in that understanding if it has to do with the ones that we're behind on. We have caught up, and I mentioned it earlier with the overtime project we did with Carol's office. We caught up some this year. So some of those, you got kind of twofold. You basically, on the ones that I mentioned that were 4,000 plus, yes, you have the possibilities of exactly what you described. Basically, we're charging the tax on whatever was on the roll previously and has not been updated for the new construction. That would be the 4,000 plus. The previous stuff that we have basically caught up this year that will process when I close the roll on the 9th and be reflected in the next bills and the additional supplementals that are going to go out are the new construction that we processed through the overtime. And that would then correct some of your first example and go to the new construction. But yes, if the problem with new construction is technically we're supposed to do a construction work in progress. So if you think about it this way, go back to your example, you have a vacant piece of land. I start building my house, and let's say you're an owner builder, and so it takes you longer than actually hiring somebody. We should be recognizing that portion that is already built every year. So let's say it takes you 2 years to fully finalize your permit, fully get it all the way done. We should recognize if 20% is done by the first roll year, we should recognize 20% of it. It prevents additional escapes if we are current with this. And it also helps the property owner because the way the R&T code is written is basically it assumes that you build a structure. Whether the bill went out or not, it knows that that there's taxes due. By doing a construction work in progress or CWIP, you have the ability to help them recognize that yes, there will be a tax bill. It's not for 100% because the structure's not finished, but it's going to recognize the 20%. It helps them know that that's approximately what's going to happen as they keep finishing this. So then the following year they finish they get to 50%, it'll recognize the 50% until it gets final. Just give you a little bit of additional background.
And then if it takes, you said it has a potential maximum of 4 years for those to be recognized by your staff. If it's longer than 4 years, do we fail to be able to rectify that, or is
basically, yes. And that's the problem with allowing I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but allowing a financial office, because you have similar things, I'm sure, in the auditor's office and treasurer's office. But in our office, because the R&T code basically only allows you to go backward 4 years, if we wait 5 years to do it, we miss out on 1 year. 1 year that increased value, 1 year that increased taxes, and it not just affects the County of Lake, because out of every single one of that 10% or every dollar of that, we only see about 25 cents of it.
Right.
The rest of it mainly goes to the schools and the cities and the fire districts. So it has a cascading effects on some of the biggest employers throughout the county if we are behind and if anything actually drops past that 4-year window. Does that help?
No, absolutely. And I figured I knew the right answers. I just wanted to check in and make sure, and that was exactly as what I was assuming. And you and I have had these conversations before as well, but I think it's important for us as a full board to know in case that there was some gaps in knowledge, and I wanted the public to be aware as well, because I think that this is absolutely one of the priorities that we have to take care of when we get together and decide what is our strategic plan. And being caught up on this, I mean, I know it's just an example that I gave, but 1% of 3,000 is a whole lot different than 1% of 200,000. And if we're looking at years and years of payment of property taxes that have been missed, maybe 3 years, maybe we're on that 4th year right now, then this is affecting what our schools can do to be better prepared. This is affecting what our fire departments can do to be better prepared. This is affecting us and what we can do in the cities as far as what we can do to be better prepared. And this is absolutely critical that we fix this. And I understand that you have this as one of your projects, but I would like to see what we can do to better support that project to get completed as soon as possible so that we can ensure that we're collecting every dollar today and not getting those dollars tomorrow. So that's one of the points I want to highlight, is that I think that doing the Prop 8s and the new constructions and everything and getting those caught up as quickly as possible, whether that's contracting with an outside resource to get that done or whatever the options are to make it happen, I think that we really need to look at that as being one of those priorities. It is an absolute bottom line, critical foundation, not of economic development necessarily, but of a stable revenue stream that we know we should have, but right now we don't.
Bruno, can I respond for a second there?
Maybe.
I just want to make sure that I emphasize the fact that basically a new construction alone has 4,000 records plus. Traditionally, we do about 3,000. That takes us an entire year to process. So there's not a real easy way to speed it up, and there's not a real easy way to contract it out. I know I've had multiple discussions with you guys as a board about contracting out. We have state certifications that are certifications that are specific to the office. And so there's not an easy way to go, in fact, I don't think there is a way. And multiple times I've gone back to our association to try and see if they've ever even heard of any outside party that is actually, the only way you usually have an avenue is if you have a retired person that has certification. We do have one person that is retired that comes in part-time, and he comes in and has been coming in, has 40 years worth of experience, but he's a retired person. That's the person that gives us additional volume and helps us with that. The only other way to do that is it's going to take years to get up and get through that. We have been nibbling at it every single year, and that's why it's only 4,000. But we have substantial to work on both those. And you are absolutely correct. You leave money on the table. It is not a healthy way to operate financially, and it affects every single one of the budgets as well as all the departments. So I'll leave it at that.
And I was just throwing out an idea. That doesn't mean that it's either a realistic idea or it is the idea, but I think that we need to sit down again when we have our ad hoc committee, and I would like to see this as a priority to look at how can we be more efficient in getting those done. And I recognize that it's a lot of work each time, but the idea is to put as much money on our table so that we can make sure to solidify the services we're providing to our communities and able to move forward on all of our goals. So that's my reason for bringing that up.
Great.
Gonna move on. I'm gonna make Kathy smile, but then not. I'm gonna make her be last on that one. So sorry, Kathy. We're gonna go straight to the tax collector. I think this is another one of those priorities. Absolutely, we need to have a regular tax auction. So I'm glad that she mentioned that. Processing checks, definitely a level of complaint that I've received on that. So I think that will make it easier. And I'm really looking forward to having 2 tax auctions as well throughout the year. And I know you mentioned you want to get some pamphlets or paperwork to help better explain things, and I hope that simultaneously all of that information can be available on the web as it should, so that people can look it up and just find it without having to necessarily come to the courthouse or make a phone call. County Council, I agree with what was said, that she's working with every single department. I think, in my opinion, County Council's goal is to keep us out of trouble so we don't have to lose any of our resources for making the wrong decisions. And I appreciate the counsel that we have received, which is why right now we're not dealing with some of those issues. IT, I have 2 things that I wanted to mention, and one is Mr. French, Your department, number one, has been absolutely crucial to our last 3 months of operation. I want to thank you. I have not had the opportunity. I know I've thanked you publicly, but I don't believe you were here in our meetings. I know I've thanked Jake for his work on all of our meetings, but I want to thank you as being the director of that department and your team for being able to make our meetings possible and available to the public, because it's been absolute, and for our staff to be able to work from home as well. It's been crucial, and you've made it happen. So thank you very much. We've talked about international access to our website. Right now, if you go out of the country, whether on vacation or whatever, we don't exist. And so I understand that there's some hardships with that, where there's an entire internet security that is required in order for us to open up to the international world. And Mr. French had told me that the amount of attacks dropped drastically when we stopped being internationally available. But I'd almost like to ask, what would be the possibility of having almost only an informational, quick splash page, international page, to at least allow people who want to come and visit California, and they're like, hey, what's Lake County? I want to know if I'm going to come by Lake County on my way between two metropolitan areas that the entire world knows about, and then they can find out about us and they can see some of the highlights. Is that something that would be possible? Because I think that if we don't appear on the web, then we just don't exist at this moment in time, and I think it would be helpful for us to do so.
Okay, right now?
Yes.
You guys can hear me, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so, you know, historically, we've had the two different web presence. We've had the marketing site, lakecounty.com, which, you know, of course, is the more tourism-focused site. And then, of course, we had the our services pages, the www.lakecountyca.gov, which is has historically been more geared towards local or semi-local county business. And so as far as that goes, the one of those that is currently not available internationally is the what I'm going to call the local services site, the www.lakecountyca.gov website. So, I mean, certainly, you know, if your board wants us to open that up, we can open the whole thing up. I don't really have a way to exactly open up a small portal for international. I don't know how effective that would actually be, but there's certainly ways we could make the thing available. And I think we would probably just host it elsewhere is probably what we would ultimately do. To kind of mitigate some of that risk, because it is a risk. I'm not saying that the minute we open the thing up, it's going to make us come crashing down, but I do have to tell you that has been a significant decrease in attack traffic that we've seen since we limited that access, since we've had the ability to limit that access. But in any event, it's certainly doable. If your board, I mean, if that's a priority for your board, I mean, happy to do it, happy to find a solution to it. I'm not exactly sure what that solution would be right this moment, but those are a couple of ideas, certainly.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just ideas to hammer down and see what's possible, what's not possible, and what's afforded to us as well. My other thing is, and I said it last week, and I'll say it again, and I know Director French and I have had these conversations, and it's not been necessarily a focus because, as he said before, he's kind of been in the survival mode and making sure everything works. But I really believe in internal process efficiencies. Part of my background is database programming, and I think that a lot of that can help us better communicate between siloed departments, where right now we're not all using the same software, we're not all using the same connecting pieces of our software or hardware. And so I think that sometimes IT has that possibility to make something more personalized to our needs, to make sure that everyone is on the same page and we don't accidentally miss something because we didn't reach out to a specific department to find out something that maybe we wouldn't have known was there. So I think that that's an important part of it, and I'd love to see that being part of the conversation as well, because as Supervisor Scott said, technology is a big piece of it, but sometimes technology is made for just everyone across the board, and it's not made for what we actually need ourselves. And so sometimes I feel that's IT, the IT department has the possibility and availability to do things like that. I'm going to move on to administrative office. Definitely appreciate the TOT increase. Do want to highlight Patrick Sullivan and his work, the TID. There's one.
Mo, I gotta break in for just 1 second. I got a doctor's appointment, so I'm going to be on the road, so I'm probably going to lose you. I've been hoping to get a chance to talk.
Then I will shut up for you.
But I guess we'll have to come back some other time. I'm a little disappointed because this is not what I intended for this to be. I thought we were going to be here to talk about supporting local businesses with economic development, not supporting the government. And that's all we've talked about. So I feel like, I've wasted 2 afternoons talking, we're not talking about purchasing policies, trying to keep our businesses going after we've shut them down. And now we're talking about, more and more programs and more ways to spend money that the government doesn't have, but we're going to collect taxes quicker from the people that we're shutting down. I'm going to have to check out, so good luck to you guys.
Thank you, Supervisor Brown. Want to finish your comments?
So I will make my comment, and just to, in respect to the comments just made, I think this was a continuation of our original conversation back in January, February, which is how can we better create a platform for better economic development. So I think that this does fit right into it. I'd love to have that other conversation that Supervisor Brown was speaking of as well, because I think that's important as well. In Vision 2028, there was a lot of visioning forums that occurred, and there was the talk about getting a grant writer, and I know that we had one. I want to say it was Freeborn. Was that her last name? That was our last in the position of grant writer. Is that correct, Ms. Hutchinson?
Kathy Freeman.
Was it Freeman? And wondering if that's...
It was Kathy Ferguson, and as a county employee, and prior to that, we had a contract with Karen McDougall.
And so thank you for that update. I was close, but I knew it wasn't correct. Is that something that the administrative office is thinking about in order to ensure that we access as much grant opportunities? I know that you are working on grant opportunities, but I don't believe we have anybody full-time working on those things constantly.
No, we're not. And the reason we're not is because I'll just be honest. Some departments apply for their own grants. Certainly there's some of that activity going on, and our office has applied for some. But we're not looking at a global plan for a grant writer. In all honesty, departments, when departments are so thinly funded, it was very, very challenging for departments to think about adding grant projects with additional duties, sometimes matching fund requirements. And so when we had the grant writer on board, we didn't get a lot of traction because departments are struggling to even fulfill their basic mandates. And so to add grant projects, which are additional tasks and duties, it just wasn't possible, and for many.
And I can appreciate that.
If you're bored, we can go back to that, certainly though.
Right, and I can appreciate the current status that we have, and maybe as we create an economic development strategical plan, that maybe having a grant writer on board with a focus on what we know we want to go after might be helpful and might help provide the opportunities that we're looking to get out of it. And so my last one is going to go back to Auditor Controller, and I believe that Kathy or Director Sederland had said credit cards, and I'm looking to have a bigger conversation about that. Is that something that you are looking already to have embedded, or is that something that you're discussing? Because I know there was some hesitancy when I spoke with Director Sederland about credit cards on certain aspects of it.
Hi, this is Kathy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I mentioned credit cards just because it's on the list of things that have been mentioned throughout. There's been a theme throughout some of these vision meetings and things that have been brought to your board, and the whole concept of the county acceptance of credit cards and electronic transactions has been brought up. And this is not a new subject, and I could go through the history of it, that the county has been discussing this for a very long time. Just in my notes, I can go back to 2008. There's a variety of reasons that it stalls. And, you know, certainly I'm willing to assist with getting it back on track. It is going to take a consolidated effort of several departments, and it will also take the buy-in from individual departments. And in order to do it properly, the county should be going out for RFP on those types of services versus the piecemeal that we currently have that is basically unsustainable and has led us to this point where it makes it impossible to add on additional departments to this option. So we currently have 5 different ways we do it. So it's just not an efficient way to do business, for the county to do business. So in order to make it more efficient, we need to really focus on a consolidated and consistent way that we're going to do this. And you mentioned the multiple software programs that departments use. That is a challenge. And it's not challenges that we can't overcome, but they need to be acknowledged in order to move forward with that project. So I have asked, it's been with the Technology Governance Committee, has brought it up several times, and I've asked for that focused effort and not just, let's just make it happen. Let's put together the plan on how to make it happen. Does that answer your question?
It sure does, and I'd love to go about it in that direction, because I agree that right now it is piecemeal, and so I'm hopeful that that's at least a conversation we can have in our upcoming ad hoc committee.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to help with that.
Thank you very much for the
Thank
time.
you, Berto. EJ.
So, I was just going to ask, I'll just go into it because I forgot what I was going to ask, but anyhow, first I was, for Lars, I know Lars isn't, I don't know if he's on, but it's more, they're more just statements that I'd like to touch base on, and Lars has been working on the Lucerne Harbor project that we put into the budget, I want to say last year, and that is, you know, one of the things that I like to talk about, especially with the economic development on the North Shore, is that for me, and this is my opinion, I feel that the Highway 20 is like the main artery to Lake County, and I know that eventually there's going to be another project that takes them around the other side of the lake. However, there's still going to be an ambiance of folks that want to still travel through that side, even though it's slower and takes longer and more scenic. But that's one thing I want to highlight is that many folks that run businesses on the North Shore, they've maintained and stayed open during this whole situation that we're in now. And so, you know, once and when we get back to the normal swing of things, of normal life, those businesses will flourish from those type of things, but from that traffic. But one thing I want to highlight, especially when it comes to parks, is that Lucerne Harbor. People will be able to dock and go to the different businesses that are local. Another item I'd like to talk about, and I think it comes down to who's on the ad hoc committee. That was what I was going to ask. Are you? It's.
We haven't decided that yet.
Okay. Well, either or.
At the end of the 4
it'll be 2 of
sessions
us.
we're having.
Yeah. And so what I'll do is, if I'm not on there, I'll just forward to whoever, because one of the things I'd like to do is kind of tackle how we can prevent vandalism in the bathrooms. You know, just start thinking of ideas, and you know, that could be a working thing in the ad hoc committee. In vandalism in general, maybe other options for different parking ventures. There is a project in Lucerne right now too that they're doing on 9th Street, and there's some folks that are a little concerned because of the homeless and whatnot. And so it's just little things like that I'd like to kind of massage out in that ad hoc committee, so we can keep those attributes very appealable still to the people that may be visiting and stopping in. another, and that's just for Lars, but again, Lars has talked with me about these things, and he's in tune with it. So I just highlight that because I want folks to know that Lars, for me, I feel that department has this in mind and they're working on that. Let's see. Okay, so treasurer, tax collector, and I just we've talked about this before, finding different ways to streamline properties on the North Shore. But of course, the whole county has this issue. So I just think that in some instances it would take care of the blight and the squatters and the different issues that we have in those local areas for some of the businesses that want to do better. So that's with that. But another thing I have on the tax collector situation, and this is just an idea. I'm sure there's a legality to this, but many people pay their tax, with their mortgage. So if I have a bank loan, I usually pay with my mortgage, and I don't have to pay the tax. But then there's some instances where people pay it on their own. And so what happens is, if someone gets behind, they end up requiring them to pay a special percentage, like 20 to 25%, before they can start making lower payments, like $100 or $200. If there's a way we can work that, we wouldn't be putting different properties in a position to be auctioned since we're backed up, to be able to collect that and possibly keep it from going there. We're losing those dollars in between because some of those barriers are too high for people that can't afford it. It's just the thought, but then again, there may be a legality to why we can't do it. I just bring it up because I'm just thinking about it. Let's see. Marketing was just about the vandalism in the bathrooms. I think that I think they do a really good job at the parks. I know we had that problem last year with some of the bathrooms being vandalized, and then some folks just being there and kind of homeless type of situations. But that's what you're going to get. It's across the state and the country. So I don't want to repeat myself. But another thing for the library, Christopher, or just the thing I thought about was you talked about the Wi-Fi, and I'm glad that you talked about the hotspot there, Bruno. But one of the things I was thinking about is in one of the programs that we talked about before, you had audiobooks, and I know that those in some instances cost money. But one thing I've been told, because I have the audiobooks app, and it costs money. But in some instances, you can find some of these books on YouTube. And so if you have some volunteers that can conduct that type of research, they can find those books, and then that way they don't have to pay for that, or that just limits some costs here and there. YouTube's a valid resource in that instance. So those are just things I was thinking of, and I just wanted to add to. So thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Crandall. What I want to do is obviously just go back what we're looking to do here. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll continue to have these workshops. This is just a continuation of what we started in February. Appreciate the opportunities for folks that have presented this at this point, the directors that have come in and gave us a report. Obviously, what we're looking to do is streamline the processes for our constituents as they come in and they're using each one of our entities as they, from the county standpoint. And I think we're moving in the right direction. I take it away from a positive standpoint of some of the things we talked about in February are starting to be initiated to help things move forward. And I know it's a long process. Kathy talks about it. They've been talking about getting credit cards back from 2008, 2009. We just continue the conversations, and hopefully we can focus in on those things that we can do immediately. We talked about it, taking the big bites or the small bites. I think our short-term and long-term goals as we put those things together. And I think it's going to be very important we hear these reports from our directors like they have done. Like I said, again, they've taken some steps forward at this point. Everyone that is presented has at least had an idea that was probably thought about after our meetings. And I just want to thank each and every one of you. And I know the other departments will keep moving in that manner. So as we put the task force together, there will be things that will come back to the board so we can focus on them directly. But I think each and every week we just make sure that we're paying attention to what's being said, obviously get our priorities together. But we've laid out a good plan for 2028. The only thing, obviously, that has put a wrench in this whole thing is obviously this pandemic that we're dealing with right now, COVID-19. So it's going to be a challenge as we move forward. But once again, I just want to thank everybody because heard great ideas, opportunities. but it's really going to get in depth when we get the task force together and then we start to see these things come back to us as a full board. But like I said, I've heard from each department that has presented at this point doing things differently than we have in the past. And that's the ultimate goal as we move forward. That's a simple use of economic development, whether you know it or not. How the folks come in and how they're greeted here in the community or at our desk when they come up to speak with someone in one of our departments is just as huge as the long-term strategies we're going to implement for economic development. So I want to thank all of our departments and the ones that are going to be presented over the next 2 weeks. And then we'll sit down and we'll really get focused on what the priorities are. I already heard some good priorities today. And ultimately, when we talked back in February, was really concentrating on our revenue generating departments. And as long as we stay focused on those things and don't get distracted with other stuff that's going on, I think we're going to move in the right direction. So I want to thank everyone. I know that now we got to do public comment. And then after that, we'll bring it back to adjourn, hopefully. Yes?
Could I just say one last thing? I actually marked it, but I didn't get to say it. It's real fast. It's a comment that I have about, you know, we talk about the economic development, but also kind of protecting and investing in the integrity and safety of our county. When I say about that is, you know, we have 60 cases now, of course, but it's still you know, a percentage lower than other counties around us and whatnot. And so I think for me, you know, if we can keep that going, it's just like, you know, it's like interest we're building for people to find this an attractive place to be. And so, you know, whatever I can do to help ensure that we can work with even the businesses or even with the departments to keep that attribute, you know, I just want to highlight that because it's been said in different meetings and I've been saying it for some time now. So,
thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. Jake?
Yes. So,
do we have any hands up?
Currently trying to check here. I'm sorry, here one by. I don't have any hands up. I had someone ask about how to raise a hand. Okay, so Shane French wanted to speak. I'm gonna unmute you here.
All right, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
Sorry, so just for the record, I was the one that didn't know how to raise his hand. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of quickly mention that, you know, the credit card discussion as it goes on, something that's recently occurred to me is, you know, in addition to credit cards, there are additional payment methods that we should probably be considering and trying to maybe future-proof ourselves a little bit. I think we all feel like we're a bit behind the 8 ball as far as credit cards are concerned, but as you probably know, there's digital wallets, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, other things like that our constituents are going to want to be using in addition to credit cards. And I don't want to give poor Barbara and Kathy a heart attack here, having all these different things coming at them, but you know, who knows, in the future you might even be talking about people paying with cryptocurrencies and all kinds of things. But I just think, I'm not saying you should do that, but you might want to just be exploring that and getting ready for it now instead of doing it later.
Right.
Appreciate those comments, and that's the kind of stuff that'll be happening at the task force. Thank you very much. Cryptocurrency. Okay, Jake, is there any other hands up or any other comment at this point?
Yes, we had Kathy Saterlin raise her hand here.
Okay.
Kathy, I'm unmuting you. We're trying to.
She just wanted to let Shane hear her heart attack.
or that she knew how to raise her hand.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So yeah, what Shane just brought up, that's part of why I said this needs to be really looked at, because it's exactly that point. It's not just a matter of taking credit cards. It's what are the other mechanisms and technologies that are available. And it's not just credit cards online, it's credit cards at counters, because you will still have people who want to show up at your counter. It's taking things over the phone. So it is a big project. It's not just as simple as just slapping credit card capability in. And right now we don't have that breadth of what we're offering. So if we're going to do it, I think we need to do it right, and that it's possible to do it. And it's going to take that planning and coming up with those different mechanisms and analyzing which of those the county really wants to offer, because you're going to have to do some cost versus benefit analysis on this, because if you offer something or you put some technology in place that one of your citizens uses, but it costs you a great deal of resources, whether that's funding or actual resources to put it in place, that's not a good use of the taxpayers' money. So you need to think about that too. And again, I'm happy to help with that process. And hopefully it can be moved forward once we have clear direction on what those technologies are, what it is we want to offer, which departments would need to offer it, and how we're going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, Jake.
All right, so it doesn't look like we have any hands raised here.
Okay. We'll go ahead and open the room, and then we'll after that we'll bring it back.
Okay, here we go. The floor is unmuted. If you would like to make a comment, please state your first and last name.
Okay, Jake, we'll go ahead and close it down and bring it back.
All right.
Carol, I don't know if you have any closing comments or...
Yes, Mr. Chair, just really quickly, I just wanted to thank everybody and remind everyone as well that next week, well, first of all, we're halfway through these introductory workshops, so that's good. And next week, we'll have the law enforcement departments present. And then on July 14th, we will have the Health and Human Services departments present. And then on July 21st, we intend to bring the agenda item to your board to form the task force. So we look forward to that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. You know, obviously, it lasted a little longer, but we had some important issues we had to take care of at the beginning of the meeting there. Obviously, the COVID-19 update always takes a little time because things are changing on a weekly basis. But that closes our meeting today. Are there any final comments from the board? Supervisor Kramer?
I just appreciate the discussion about the different ways to pay. When we talk about this county and a lot of other folks talk about this county, we talk about being one of the poorer counties or the indigent counties. And so you have different options for people to pay rather than just commonly checks. Some folks don't even have checking accounts and things like that for situations in the county. It really helps. They're starting to get used to these Venmo accounts, these Zelle accounts, Cash App, things like that. And then some of their debit cards are attached to their, social services or whatever the case may be. And so when we discuss things like that, we really talk about truly meeting with more of a demographic in our county. So I appreciate that discussion.
Excellent. Any final comments from the board? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and we're going to adjourn the meeting at 4:25 today. So thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.